Chapter 947. Alessia Elven Academy, the Dean's office. Sitting behind the luxurious desk, Grey Vath raised her head and looked forward. As far as Grey Vath could see, the two of them stood some distance apart. It was Noah and Claire who had just returned from the elven forest. Grey Vath glanced at the elven mark on the back of Noah's left hand and smiled. Looks like things went quite smoothly. Successful. Noah raised his hand that was branded with the elven mark, and said in a self-deprecating manner. If you saw how unreasonable that wild elf was at the scene, I wonder if you would still have such thoughts. Isn't it fine as long as the result is smooth? Grey Vath said nonchalantly. You should be satisfied to be able to successfully form a contract with such a high-level elf. After speaking, Grey Vath no longer paid attention to Noah. Instead, she looked at Claire, who had been keeping her head down the entire time, and said meaningfully. I think a little failure is a good thing for you. What do you think? Claire bit her lips and glared at Noah with her fiery red eyes. She looked like she had a deep grudge against him and even pointed a finger at Noah. You only formed a contract with a wild elf from who knows where. That doesn't mean I lost to you. Noah felt a headache coming on. I didn't say I wanted to compete with you, did I? This kind of thing is a test of luck, isn't it? As mentioned before, elves also had their own wills. Although Witch-G would be able to communicate with fairies as long as she was pure and untainted, forming a contract was another matter altogether. Elves had the right to choose the master they liked. Therefore, even if an elven user's abilities were lower, as long as they had a deep emotional foundation with the elf, they could sometimes form a contract with a high-level elf. Therefore, forming a contract with an elf would not only test the elven user's abilities, but also the compatibility. When they were in the ancestral hall, the sealed sword elf was obviously very resistant to Claire. As for Noah, the sword elf was resistant at first, but for some reason, it suddenly compromised. Maybe I just happened to get along well with that sword elf. Noah shrugged. Maybe it felt that you weren't suitable for it, so it refused to form a contract with you. That's also possible, right? What do you mean by that? Claire was furious. You want to say that I have a bad temper and the elf hates me, right? I didn't say that. Noah looked at Claire with ridicule. If you mind, I can help you ask that sword sprite. While saying this, Noah deliberately waved his hand with the elven mark in front of Claire with a spurious smile. Claire's petite body began to tremble. Just when Noah thought that he had angered Claire, tears suddenly welled up in the corners of Claire's eyes. Undoubtedly, you defiled me and almost made me pregnant. In the elven forest, you even planned to turn into a wolf and eat me in one bite. Now you're saying such irresponsible words. Claire shouted at Noah. I hate you the most. Leaving these words behind, Claire ran out of the office with tears streaming down her face like a woman who had been abandoned. Noah was completely frozen in place. He couldn't even move. Oh. Grey and Vath looked at Noah with bone-chilling eyes. So you did that kind of thing. Seeing the bone-chilling coldness in Grey and Vath's eyes, Noah's mouth twitched. He took a deep breath and spoke in a deep voice. If I say that things aren't what you think, will you believe me? Believe, of course I believe you. After all, you were invited by me to study in this academy. You didn't come here with bad intentions, right? Grey and Vath smiled sweetly, but there was no smile in her eyes. I just hope that you can move around in front of me as much as possible. That way, I will feel more at ease. Do you understand? Noah raised his head and looked at the ceiling, speechless. Elven forest, open space. Noah and Grey and Vath walked out of Elven Academy and stood facing each other, bathing in the warm sunlight. Looking carefully, Grey and Vath were explaining something to Noah without stopping. In short, if you want to summon your own contracted spirit, you must first focus your will on the proof of the contract with the spirit, which is the spirit mark. Then, you must use an exclusive spirit summoning incantation, which is the so-called contract method. Through the connection with the spirit in the elemental spirit world, you can open a circuit to the elemental spirit world. Then, you can summon your contracted spirit. Gray and Vath explained attentively, which was rare. As for the contract method, you just need to focus your will on the spirit mark, and you should be able to get it. Noah nodded, indicating that he understood. Gray and Vath took a step back. I've already taught you the specific method. Now, you can try to summon your contracted spirit. Noah nodded silently again. He raised his left hand that was engraved with the elven seal and closed his eyes. Wang! Some divine power flowed out from the nearly infinite divine power source in Noah's body and flowed to Noah's arm. Then, it passed through Noah's arm and poured into the spirit mark. Noah followed the method taught by Gray and Vath and focused his will on the spirit mark on the back of his left hand. It was like sinking his consciousness into a crystal-clear lake. His will continued to concentrate. This process lasted for who knows how long. Until a certain moment, Noah suddenly felt a flash of inspiration in his heart, causing him to open his mouth slightly as though he was blessed with good fortune. Then, he chanted the elven language that turned into a spell. Cold Steel Queen, holy sword that slays demons and demons, turn into a sword of steel and bestow me with divine power. The melodious elven incantation echoed in the air, accompanied by a surge of divine power that spread in all directions. Clank! Suddenly, the faint spirit mark on the back of Noah's left hand lit up. Noah could feel it. At this moment, the elven seal in his hand, with the help of Noah's divine power, built a passage that extended into the void and spread to another world that coexisted with this world. Not long after, as if a door leading to another world had been opened, the passage built from the elven mark connected with a brand new world, forming a loop. However, at this moment, the light that bloomed from Noah's spirit mark paused. Bang! Without any warning, the light that flashed from the spirit mark on the back of Noah's hand suddenly shattered like a ceramic that fell to the ground. Immediately after, the circuit that was connected to the elemental fairies' world also disappeared. Noah abruptly opened his eyes and stood up in surprise. What's going on? What's going on? Gray and Vath also rushed forward and frowned. Did something happen? No, it's nothing. Noah shook his head and stared at the spirit mark on the back of his left hand. He also frowned. It's just that, for some reason, after the circuit was built, there was a problem with the summoning. A problem with the summoning. Gray and Vath's frown deepened. In other words, you can't summon a contracted spirit. I don't know. Noah clenched his left hand that had the spirit mark on it. His eyes flickered slightly. Instead of saying that I can't summon a contracted spirit, it's more like the contracted spirit can't respond to my summoning. The contracted spirit can't respond to your summoning. Gray and Vath pondered. Could it be that there's a problem with that spirit in the elemental world of spirits? That's why I don't know. Noah raised his head and looked at Gray and Vath. I'm just a newbie who just started learning the skills of elven summoning. If you don't know, it's even more impossible for me to know. That's true. Gray and Vath smiled bitterly. For now, let's observe the situation first. Hearing this, Noah could only nod helplessly. Chapter 948. It was nighttime. In the elven forest that had turned dark and gloomy, Noah held a sharp long sword in his hand and slowly drew a pattern on the ground. It was a simple magic circle. To be more precise, it was a simple magic circle that wasn't too complicated, but was very delicate and detailed. After directly carving this magic circle on the ground with his sword, Noah casually threw away the sharp long sword in his hand and allowed it to be swallowed by the sudden fluctuation of golden ripples. Then, he stood in the center of the magic circle. Taking a deep breath, Noah closed his eyes and extended his hand that was engraved with the elven mark. Cold Steel Queen, holy sword that slays demons and demons, turn into a sword of steel and bestow me with divine power, contract form. Elves needed to use the elven incantation when summoning their contracted elves. Just like humans, although they were collectively called humans, they couldn't become the same existence. The same principle applied to every single elf. Therefore, after forming a contract with a sprite, the sprite incantation required for each contract sprite to be summoned, which was the form of the contract, was different. Now, Noah was chanting the contract form that belonged to his contracted elf. Clang! Just like during the day, the moment Noah's contract form was cast, the elven mark that was branded on Noah's left hand bloomed with dazzling light. At the same time, the magic circle carved on the ground also shone, illuminating the entire dark space. Between the surrounding trees and bushes, evil elves that were hiding and preparing to do something bad to Noah were frightened by the sudden light. One by one, they fled in panic and disappeared in an instant. Noah stood in the center of the dazzling magic circle and tried his best to imbue the elven mark in his hand with divine power. He tried to use this door that could connect to the elemental elf world at any time and summon his contracted elf. Unfortunately, things didn't go as he wished. Just like during the day, the light that bloomed from Noah's elven mark suddenly froze. Bang! With a clear cracking sound, the light shattered like glass, turning into light particles that dissipated into the air. On the ground, the dazzling magic array gradually dimmed until it completely disappeared. Noah slowly opened his eyes. He stared at the elven mark on the back of his hand and sighed. It still doesn't work. Because the summoning during the day had failed, Noah planned to use the help of the magic array to open the circuit to the elemental sprite world more smoothly and summon the contracted sprites. Generally, this method of summoning contracted sprites with the help of magic square matrices was used by those who had just concluded a contract with sprites and were unable to act independently. It could make it easier for immature sprite users to summon contracted sprites. Originally, Gray and Vath thought that with Noah's talent, even if he had just contracted a sprite, he didn't need to install 2 small wheels on the back to avoid falling down like a child learning how to ride a bicycle. Who would have thought that the summoning would fail? Noah had no choice but to use this method, which was similar to installing 2 small wheels on the rear wheel of a bicycle to avoid falling down, to summon the elves. If this still doesn't work, then I guess there's really no other way. Noah gently stroked the elven mark on the back of his hand and fell into deep thought. Why is that so? In fact, it wasn't rare for sprite users to be unable to summon contracted sprites in this world. Because only the pure witch concubine could communicate with sprites, if one's body was tainted, then it was natural for one to be unable to summon sprites suddenly. Apart from that, for example, breaking the oath of the contract, causing one to be unable to communicate with sprites due to mental trauma, would also cause sprite users to be unable to summon sprites. In short, the matter of communicating with sprites was closely related to the sprite user's mental state. Noah wasn't a pure witch concubine to begin with. He was an exception to the rule of male sprite users. Naturally, there was no such thing as his body being tainted, losing his purity, and being unable to communicate with sprites. Therefore, this possibility could be ruled out first. Breaking the oath of the contract, or having mental trauma, had never happened to Noah before. Then, the only possibility was that the problem didn't lie with Noah, the sprite user, but with the sprite he was contracted with. Is it not willing to respond to my summoning? Or is it unable to respond to my summoning? Noah couldn't figure it out and could only give up on thinking about it. Forget it, let nature take its course. Looking at the magic formation engraved on the ground, Noah walked out of the open space and headed in the direction of Alicia Elven Academy. Ever since he came to this world, Noah had spent nearly half a month in the Elven Forest. The reason for this was that no one would disturb him in the Elven Forest, allowing Noah to focus on his training as a sprite user. Secondly, the Elven Academy was filled with pure witch concubines. There was no male dormitory, so Noah could only spend half a month in the Elven Forest. And in this half a month, Gray and Vaz had taught Noah almost everything they needed to teach. Now, all that was left was for Noah to learn and practice. Only then did Greyvath, who felt as if she had been relieved of a huge responsibility, remember the problem of Noah's residence and began to make arrangements. She said she would solve this problem, but why do I have a bad premonition? In the courtyard of the Elven Academy, Noah leaned against a lamppost and scratched his face. I hope that witch didn't trick me. However, for Noah, it seemed that today was destined not to be a smooth day. The male sprite user over there. Suddenly, an awe-inspiring voice rang out beside Noah. Noah turned his head and looked over. Then, as if he didn't want to see anyone, he covered his face. What is the meaning of this? You rude guy. A slightly angry voice told Noah that even if he didn't see it, it wouldn't become an illusion. At that moment, Noah could only raise his head and look over with narrowed eyes. Not too far away from Noah, a ponytailed girl was looking at Noah with displeasure. She was wearing a pure white uniform and a knight's sword in its scabbard at her waist. She was wearing a small amount of light clothing. Alice Farangelto. She was the leader of the Wind King Knights who was in charge of law and order in the Elven Academy. This girl, who didn't have a good impression of Noah when they first met, had her cute face tense. She stared at Noah as if he wasn't a classmate, but a criminal who was about to commit a crime. She was full of vigilance. Noah didn't know how many times he sighed today. His face was full of bitterness. As expected, the ominous premonition was right. What are you mumbling about? Alice raised her eyebrows. Then, she thought of something and widened her eyes. She gripped the hilt of the knight's sword at her waist tightly. Could it be that you're really like what the girls in the academy said? That you know some incantation that can lure innocent girls to bed? Who knows that kind of incantation? Noah couldn't help but ridicule. If there really is such an incantation, then all the girls will be done for, right? Wah! What? Alice was shocked and her face turned fierce. You still plan to use such despicable methods to conquer all the girls on this continent? Shameless! I won't let you get away with it. After saying that, Alice immediately wanted to draw her sword, but Noah's face twitched, and he put on a fake smile. Let's not talk about the structure of your brain for you to have such thoughts. But let me say this first. If you make a move, I'll tie you up again and hang you in front of the academy's door. Tomorrow, all the students in the academy will come and admire the majestic figure of the leader of the knights. Alice's hand froze, and she bit her lip, looking indignant. You actually dare to threaten me? You are indeed an evil man. Noah wanted to cry but had no tears. Why did it become like this? Chapter 949. Thud. 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 It was late at night in the Elven Academy. Clear and crisp footsteps reverberated back and forth in the square and courtyard. Coupled with the gloomy atmosphere in the surroundings, it made one's hair stand on end. However, the one who made such footsteps wasn't a ghostly elf, but a beautiful young lady. With her long, dark blue hair tied into a ponytail, the leader of the Wind King Knights, Alice, walked in a certain direction with seemingly hurried steps with a stern expression. Of course, Noah, who was walking behind Alice, couldn't see the expression of the leader of the Wind King Knights. He merely walked a short distance behind Alice with a helpless expression. Why are you in charge of leading the way for me? Although he didn't know what kind of residence Gray and Vaz had prepared for him, Noah, who had lived like a savage in the deep mountains for 4 years, shouldn't be concerned about it. What Noah was more concerned about was why this old-fashioned and strict leader of the Wind King Knights was in charge of leading the way for him. It was impossible that Gray and Vaz didn't know that Alice didn't like this male elf, Noah, right? It should be said that not only Alice, but all the elven envoys in the Elven Academy had no immunity to men. In fact, most of the elven envoys outside the academy were very pure. It was only natural that they would be so concerned about and even afraid of a man. And from Alice's behavior, it could be seen that this lass was also a standard innocent young lady. However, as the leader of the Wind King Knights who managed the security and order of the academy, Alice still chose to stand out and protect the students in the academy even though she didn't like Noah, a male elf. In the end, due to the conflict between her excessive awareness and her duty, Alice should hate Noah more than anyone else in the academy. Why would she still lead the way for Noah in the middle of the night? Noah could only think of Gray and Vaz's arrangement. Unfortunately, it really wasn't Gray and Vaz's arrangement this time. I volunteered to lead the way for you, and even took care of the matter of your residence. Alice spat out some merciless words without even turning her head. Do you have any objections? It's not an opinion. Noah shrugged. I'm just curious as to why you would pay attention to a male elven envoy like me who might destroy the discipline and order of the academy. Of course I should be the one to do this, shouldn't I? Alice said firmly. If it was another student who was leading the way for you and was attacked by you, what would you do? Attack? Noah was speechless. Just because of this reason? Of course not. Alice snorted. I still have to personally watch your every move. In other words. Noah rubbed his temples. This is surveillance, right? That's right, Alice admitted bluntly. Everyone in the academy said that you didn't see anyone during the day, so you must be planning to hunt at night. Hunt? Noah blinked. What hunt? Do you even need to say it? Alice said without hesitation. Isn't it just hunting females? Noah's eyelids twitched. He resisted the urge to beat his chest and forced out such a question. Allow me to ask, since I entered the academy, what kind of rumors have been spreading about me? Noah learned from Claire that there were rumors about him circulating in the academy. For example, as long as he talked to a witch G, he could taint her. As long as he looked at a witch G, he could make her pregnant. For example, as long as he got close to witch G, he would transform into a wolf and devour her in a single bite. Alice also said that there were rumors in the academy that Noah knew how to seduce young girls into bed. Now, with the addition of the rumors about him coming out in the middle of the night to hunt young girls, Noah really didn't know what kind of rumors had been spreading about him. Do you think no one knows about all the good things you've done? Upon hearing Noah's question, Alice snorted disdainfully as she spoke. For example, you forced yourself on the dean and had something on her, threatening her to let you study here. Another example is that you've been in the elven forest every day to find pure elves to form contracts with. We already know about all the dirty things you've done. All right. Noah gave up. It's my fault. In this world, there were indeed things that were better if one didn't know about them. Noah really regretted asking Alice this question. However, Alice didn't understand the meaning behind Noah's words and frowned. Do you think it's useful to admit your mistake now? The evil things you've done can't be erased just because of your words. Noah was speechless. Oh, right. Alice suddenly tilted her head and asked. What do you mean by forcing yourself on her? For the first time, Noah had the urge to die. We're here. About 5 minutes later, Alice stopped in her tracks and pointed in front. Your dorm is there. Upon hearing this, Noah raised his eyes and looked in the direction that Alice was pointing at. Suddenly, a very imposing building appeared in front of Noah's eyes. It was a building that was much larger than an ordinary house. There were many small rooms inside, and there was a large shower beside it. In front of the building, at the entrance, there was a large pile of wooden barrels filled with straw fodder. Inside, there were many fine horses with their eyes closed and heads lowered, sleeping soundly. Yes. In each of the small rooms in the building, there was a horse. Noah was completely dumbfounded. That can't be a stable, right? This Alice, is she planning to let me live in a stable? What are you looking at? Alice said in dissatisfaction. I'm not showing you the stable, but the side of the stable. Now that Alice had mentioned it, Noah finally realized what was going on. Just beside the stable, there was a simple hut. It was a small wooden hut that looked like it was about to collapse. How is it? Not bad, right? Alice said with some pride. It took me 3 hours to build it using my contracted spirits. Noah was once again speechless. This time, Noah was completely sure. If it wasn't that Alice really wanted to take revenge, then it was that the eyes and values of the leader of the Knights were different from his. Noah could only let out a long sigh, and extended a hand toward the extremely simple hut. Just as Alice was wondering what Noah was planning to do, Noah's eyes sharpened. Ha! Accompanied by a deep roar, a burst of powerful divine might energy suddenly erupted with Noah's palm as the center. Dong! The berserk divine might transformed into the most substantial shockwave. It scraped the ground and stirred up sand and dust. It carried with it a strong vibration and whistling sound. It surged toward the simple and crude hut like a toppling mountain and overturning sea, covering it. Bang! Unsurprisingly, the simple hut made of wooden blocks was directly swept away by the violent divine aura, completely falling apart. Alice sucked in a cold breath as she watched the scene unfold. Just by releasing the power of the divine might, it could actually cause a physical effect. What kind of powerful divine might was required to accomplish such a feat? It was just blown away, and it fell apart immediately. Noah glanced at Alice. You intend to let me live in a place like this? Are you dissatisfied with something? Alice reacted and stared at Noah. Don't tell me you want to live in the female dormitory. Noah slapped his forehead and ignored Alice. He looked around and then came to the bottom of a tree. Who? The tip of his foot touched the ground, and Noah leaped into the air and onto the tree. He leaned against the trunk, sat on a thick branch, hugged his arms, closed his eyes, and entered a state of deep sleep. Seeing this, Alice couldn't help but be at a loss. He can't be planning to live on the tree, right? Chapter 950. This was an extremely austere shout and battle cry that couldn't be expressed with words. It was a battlefield that was filled with murderous shouts and sounds of fighting. A battlefield where a fortress was located. On such a battlefield, it was as if the people were shouting out the last glory of their lives. Loud and clear battle cries resounded throughout the sky, causing the air to be filled with a solemn and stirring atmosphere, causing one's heart to tighten. And on this battlefield, there were 2 camps. One was the camp that wore elven devices that were transformed from elves and constantly launched fierce attacks in the direction of the fortress. The other was a faction that used the fortress as a stronghold and mercilessly released their elves towards the charging faction using the elven devices, allowing the elves with various appearances, attributes, abilities, and levels to retaliate. With the elven users wearing different elven magical equipment and the elven users controlling elves of different shapes at the center, the warriors of the 2 camps engaged in a bitter battle on the battlefield. For a moment, the space was filled with saber light and sword shadows, the air was filled with waves of divine power impact, and even the sound of weapons clashing constantly shook the ears. The scene was extremely shocking. However, the elves and elven users that were fighting on the battlefield were only small soldiers of the 2 camps. The real battle that determined the outcome of the battle wasn't carried out on the battlefield, but in the magnificent fortress that entered the final stage. It was a corridor that was dyed red by the blood of a large number of fallen soldiers. On the corridor, a young girl with beautiful golden hair that reached her waist and full of majesty and holiness was charging forward like a gust of wind while repeatedly brandishing a steel sword that shone with dazzling light like a storm, causing sword light to flash in all directions. Even in such a corridor that was dyed red with blood, the young girl's body still wasn't stained by even a drop of blood. She was like a lotus flower that wasn't stained by mud, very pure and holy. And the young girl's figure that repeatedly brandished the steel sword that shone with silver light seemed to be dancing lightly and gracefully, looking extremely beautiful. It was a gorgeous battle technique known as the sword dance. The young girl smoothly executed this battle technique that was closely related to elves and slashed the elves that were attacking her one by one. Then, as the sword light flashed and her figure flashed, she killed the elven users that were controlling these elves on the spot in bursts of blood splattering everywhere. Even so, the young girl didn't stop her pace and didn't even slow down her speed. She constantly attacked, and attacked again. This process lasted for an unknown period of time. During this period, no one knew how many elven users and elves died in the young girl's hands. However, the historic battle that brought the war to an end was unavoidable. Wielding the steel sword that shone with silver light, the young girl killed the last elf, passed through the corridor, and arrived at the deepest part of the fortress. In front of the young girl, in the distance, there was a throne. It was a throne that was surrounded by dark flames that burned fiercely as if it was used by the ghost king of hell. A person was sitting on the throne. Because of the dark flames that burned fiercely, the appearance of the person on the throne was somewhat blurry and swaying. But even so, one could still tell from the outline of the person's body. The person on the other side was a male. The man's appearance couldn't be seen at all as he leisurely sat on the throne. His body was burning with dark flames, and the space around him began to distort. Elves of various shapes and sizes with terrifying pressure drilled out one after another. A male elven user that could enslave elves. The other party's identity was already obvious. Solomon. The demon king that once brought a devastating disaster to the entire continent. According to the legends, this demon king was so powerful that he could even control the elves of the 72 pillars. Originally, if one formed a contract with two elves at the same time, it would already cause the elves to interfere with each other, which would negatively affect the elves. Under such circumstances, the demon king named Solomon could effortlessly form a contract with the elves of the 72 pillars at the same time and perfectly control these 72 elves. That was simply a god-level ability. It was precisely because of this that the demon king named Solomon had the ability to bring disaster to the entire continent, causing people to be abnormally fearful of him. However, facing the demon king who had the ability to control the 72 pillar spirits, the girl who held the silver sword did not have a trace of fear in her heart. His aura was even stronger than that of the demon king who controlled the 72 spirit pillars. Immediately after, the young girl with the steel sword in her hand shot out like an arrow from a bow. She leaped up and shot out. In his hand, on the gorgeous steel sword that was covered in dazzling light, there was a paragraph of ancient elven language inscribed on the blade. If translated, the meaning of this elvish text was as follows: World Protector, Terminus Estate. Noah abruptly opened his eyes, as if he had just woken up from a nightmare. His eyes flickered with some lingering fear. However, what was imprinted in Noah's eyes, which still had lingering fear, was not a cruel battlefield, but an environment filled with birds and fragrant flowers. Surrounding him was a vast courtyard. In the distance, there were luxurious buildings. On the side, the horse that had already awakened with the arrival of morning lowered its head, chewing the grass in the wooden bucket in front of it, making everything seem so peaceful. And Noah, naturally, was sitting on a thick branch, leaning against the trunk as he woke up in the tree. The sky was already bright. One by one, the witches wearing pure white uniforms walked from afar, laughing and chatting. But when they saw Noah, their faces were immediately shocked, and they let out a soft scream, looking in the direction of Noah, chattering about something. Sensing that in the courtyard not far away, there were actually many girls gathered together, looking at him with fear and curiosity, Noah bitterly smiled and raised one hand. On the back of this hand, there was a mysterious and unfathomable, but incomparably powerful seal spirit imprint that was left behind after forming a contract. Looking at the seal on the back of his hand, Noah muttered. Is that the sword spirit's dream? In the world of Type Moon, the master who formed a contract with the heroic spirit in the form of a servant through the Holy Grail of Fuyuki City could see the past memories and life of his servant in the dream. And in this world, the elves and elven users who also formed a contract could also share dreams with each other. Especially when the elves or elven users had some problems, making the door that connected the two unable to open, this phenomenon would become even more frequent. Now, Noah encountered such a thing. The elven user girl who had the final battle with the Demon King. Noah's eyes flashed. Could it be, that is the saintess who saved the world? Why would he dream of the final battle between the saintess who saved the world and the Demon King of Disaster when he shared the dream with the elves? Don't tell me that the sword sprite is really the saintess sprite, the famous demon slayer. Noah recalled the elven words engraved on the sword in the girl's hand that he saw in the dream. World Guardian God, Terminus Estate. That wouldn't be the original name of the demon slayer, would it? Before Noah could think of a reason, a cold and familiar voice sounded under the tree. How long do you plan to stay up there like this? Accompanied by such a sentence, Alice, who appeared under the tree without him knowing, raised her head, stared at Noah, and said loudly. Hurry up and come down. Noah was awakened from his own world, shook his head, and suppressed the contents of this unusual dream deep in his heart. No matter how powerful the elves were, it was useless if they couldn't be summoned. It was more important to think about how to summon the elves. Chapter 951. Why are you in a daze over there? Seeing that Noah had been sitting on the tree and clenching his hand that was engraved with the elven mark, Alice raised her eyebrows, her tone stern. Hurry up and come down. Noah pursed his lips when he heard this. He stood up and supported himself with one hand on the tree trunk. Then, he leaped down and landed in front of Alice in an extremely nimble manner. As Noah landed, Alice, who was less than a meter away from Noah, was immediately hit by a masculine scent that was different from the light fragrance of a young girl. Her body stiffened and her face turned red. She hurriedly escaped and pointed at Noah with a red face. Don't suddenly appear in front of me. Idiot. Noah was speechless after being scolded by Alice. I can't not come down, I can't come down either. What do you want? Ahem. Alice seemed to know that she was being too unreasonable and could only pretend to cough before changing the topic. Did you sleep well last night? Hearing this, Noah looked at Alice in surprise. Doesn't this guy hate me? Why was she suddenly concerned about him? Don't misunderstand. I'm just asking as the leader of the knights. Alice blushed as she complained to Noah. It's not because I'm concerned about you. Hearing Alice's words, Noah smiled. It seemed that although Alice didn't say anything, she couldn't get over the fact that Noah could only sleep on a tree. If Noah had obediently stayed in the simple house last night, it would have been fine. After all, there were walls and tiles, and he didn't need to be exposed to the elements. Compared to the other students, it was just a matter of treatment. However, Noah had gone to sleep in a tree, which made the leader of the knights feel apologetic. On the surface, she was very strict, but that was probably because she didn't allow herself to be frivolous as the leader of the knights. Actually, this girl's heart was quite gentle. At that moment, Noah shook his head with a smile. Thank you for your concern, Knight Commander. I slept very well last night. Is that so? Alice intentionally coughed twice and pretended to ask casually. But didn't you sleep on the tree? Can you sleep well like that? There's nothing wrong with sleeping on a tree, right? Noah stretched lazily. In the past, when I was cultivating in the deep mountains and forests, not to mention sleeping on trees, I even slept on uneven rocks. For me, I really don't have any requirements for accommodation. Not only that, in the world of the Dark Bullet, when he first decided to help the cursed child there, Noah even lived in the ruins of the wilderness with the children who had protozoan virus flowing in their bodies. In addition to the 4 years of cultivation in the deep mountains and forests, all these experiences created a character of Noah who was not too extravagant and did not have any excessive requirements for material things. Otherwise, with a treasure vault filled with countless treasures, if it was an ordinary person, they would have already lived an extravagant life of a nouveau riche. Noah's words made Alice more or less surprised. You also cultivated in the deep mountains and forests. Of course. Noah glanced at Alice. There is no free lunch in this world. If you want to get something, you have to give something. The only people who will fulfill all your requirements for free are your parents, and only a few others. After he finished speaking, Noah glanced at the surroundings and looked at the young girls who were hiding far away and pointing at him. They couldn't conceal their curiosity and fear, and he spoke helplessly. Speaking of which, Captain Knight, can I trouble you to think of a way to solve this situation? Alice, who had fallen into deep thought because of Noah's words, finally reacted. She looked around, and when she saw those students hiding at the side and secretly sizing Noah up, her expression turned serious as she spoke loudly. Class is about to start. Those who should go back to class, go back to class. Don't stay here. Yes, the surrounding girls immediately dragged out their voices and replied. As they chattered, they scattered in all directions and kept looking back, secretly looking at Noah. Then, Noah vaguely heard such a conversation. That's the rumored male elf messenger, right? He doesn't look as scary as others say. Yes. Undoubtedly, they say that he has 3 heads, 6 arms, 8 legs, and is very ugly. No, I heard that he has 4 heads, 4 arms, and 12 legs. Doesn't he have 8 heads? Does he have 8 heads? I think so, then I must have remembered wrongly. I knew it, right? Hearing this conversation, Noah's mood was as if a bottle of 5 different flavors had been knocked over. Sour, sweet, bitter, spicy, all sorts of flavors were present. It seemed that the rumors about Noah that spread in the Elven Academy were much more exaggerated than Noah had imagined. Oh, right. At this moment, Alice placed a small package in front of Noah. Take this. Noah took it, puzzled. What is this? Your school uniform and your student ID. Alice turned her head away and stuttered, your school uniform and your student ID. As for your residence, I will report to the dean and make other arrangements. That's all. After saying this, Alice turned around, as if she didn't want Noah to see her less strict side, and walked away. This girl. Noah could only laugh as he hugged the package. She really isn't honest enough. Not long after, Noah reappeared in the courtyard of the Elven Academy. At this moment, Noah was already wearing the uniform of the Alicia Elf Academy. The basic color scheme was the same as the other students. It was white with some black lines, but it was a male style. Of course, the lower half of his body was not a skirt, but a pair of pure white trousers. It was quite comfortable to wear. The uniforms of the Elven Academy were all made of cloth that was blessed with elven magic and ritual music. Not only did it have some defensive capabilities, but it also had some functions to protect against cold, heat, and even poison. Unfortunately, Noah's body had a strong resistance to curses. For example, the protection provided by elven magic and ritual music, regardless of whether it was beneficial or not, would all be repelled by Noah's body. Therefore, when Noah put on this uniform, it became an extremely ordinary student uniform without any defensive capabilities. Of course, Noah didn't really need it. Walking in the courtyard of the Elven Academy, Noah scratched his head. Where is the library? In the morning, Noah had a dream about having an extraordinary relationship with his contracted spirit. That dream, which was related to the Saintess and the Demon King, told Noah that his contracted spirit was definitely not an ordinary sword spirit. It was very likely that it was the contracted spirit that the Saintess of Salvation used to kill the Demon King when she was alive. However, Noah actually didn't know much about the Saintess. It was only because the legend was too famous that he saw a portion of it in the book that he borrowed from the dean's office. In order to find out more about his contracted spirit, Noah needed to understand more about it. That way, he might be able to find out what was wrong with his contracted spirit. However, Noah wasn't particularly familiar with the academy. He only knew that there was a library here where many secrets of the Elven Empire could be found. But, where is this library? Noah stood in the middle of the courtyard with a distressed expression. If only there was someone to lead the way. Almost at the same time, a voice sounded from behind Noah. "What are you doing?" Noah was startled and immediately turned his head to look behind him. There was a petite girl with bright red hair tied into two ponytails standing there with her hands on her hips. She was looking at Noah with her head held high and her chest puffed out. She was unwilling to lose in front of Noah. Noah blinked. Claire Lucio. Why is this girl here? But, she came at the right time. Chapter 952. The Fairy Contracted by the Saintess of Salvation. Claire was startled by Noah's words as she walked on a sunny road. That sword fairy is the Saintess of Salvation's contracted fairy. It's only a possibility. Noah waved his hand, indicating for Claire not to make a fuss. But I did have a dream where the Saintess had a final battle with the Demon King when she was alive. And the Saintess' elven device, that shining silver steel sword, looked very much like the sword spirit we met in the ancestral hall. Sharing the dreams of fairies. Claire tilted her head. Now that I think about it, that sword sprite might really be the contracted sprite of the Saintess of Salvation. From time to time, I would have extremely happy dreams of eating canned food. That should be Scarlet's dream. After saying this, Claire's expression became more or less vexed. I didn't expect the Saintess of Salvation's contracted fairy to be in the elven forest of the Elven Academy. If the contract had been successful at that time, as she said this, the vexed expression on Claire's face turned into a thick unwillingness. Noah, who had clearly seen Claire's expression, asked without batting an eyelid. Why do you desire power so much? Claire's footsteps paused imperceptibly, but she quickly returned to her original state. A resolute expression appeared in her fiery red eyes. Because I have something I must do no matter what. For this, I need a powerful fairy. Is that so? Noah was silent for a moment before speaking. But there are many ways to pursue power. Your method gives me a dangerous feeling of wanting to achieve it regardless of everything. That's not a good thing. It doesn't matter. There wasn't a trace of confusion in Claire's tone. As long as I can achieve my goal, it doesn't matter what happens to me. After saying this, Claire didn't say anything else. She just kept walking forward with her head lowered, silently urging Noah to speed up. Looking at Claire's back, Noah followed. This was a very vast library. However, rather than calling it a library, it was more like a large sunroom. In addition to the bookshelves filled with books on the four walls, the center was paved with red bricks. Some were arranged with flower beds, while others were arranged with lawns. There was a large glass window on the ceiling, and luxurious tables and chairs were placed below. It looked quite attractive. Is this the library? Noah's tone sounded uncertain. Why does it look more like an indoor cafe? That's for resting. Claire pointed at the bookshelves leaning against the walls. As for the books, they are all there. Only a few extremely secretive ones are sealed in the inner area. Only those who have the permission of the Academy's headmaster can enter that place. Even the Wind King Knights are only permitted to take a look around when they are patrolling, but they don't have the authority to flip through the books. You want to find books related to the Saintess and the Holy Sword, don't you? Claire crossed her arms. Then you can find the books you want here. Is that so? Noah smiled and looked at Claire. Then thank you for leading the way. I'm not trying to help you. Claire turned her head away shyly. It's just that you've already snatched my spirit, but I can't summon it. It's just that I can't stand it. Apart from that, there's no other meaning. Yes, yes. Noah spread his hands. Anyway, I'm more or less used to the girls in this academy being tsundere. I'm not tsundere. Claire retorted. Unfortunately, Noah ignored Claire's rebuttal and walked forward. At this moment, Noah suddenly noticed a place. It was a small display window. There were two portraits on the display window. One was a girl with long silver-gray hair, about 14 or 15 years old. The other was a girl with long black hair that reached her waist, about 13 or 14 years old. Of these two girls, one was wearing a formal suit with a strict style, while the other was wearing a foreign costume similar to that of a witch. What they had in common was that both girls held a pitch-black knight's sword in their hands. Even though the style was different, the pitch-black color and strange shape were still very eye-catching. Noah only felt that the girl with long silver-gray hair around 14 or 15 years old looked very familiar. When he saw the pitch-black knight's sword in the girl's hands, Noah couldn't help but be shocked. That can't be Grey Vath, right? Upon closer inspection, although the girl with long silver-gray hair looked a little naive, he could tell that she was Grey Vath. And that pitch-black knight's sword was Grey Vath's elven equipment that Noah had seen more than once. That guy actually hung his own portrait in the library. Noah was speechless. Isn't that too narcissistic? What are you saying? Claire looked at Noah in disbelief. It'd be weird if there wasn't a portrait of the dean here, right? Oh. Noah said strangely. Why? You don't know. Claire's expression became even more incredulous. The dean is known as the strongest elven envoy on the continent. You don't know. The strongest elven envoy on the continent. Noah was really startled and said in surprise. Grey Vath is the strongest elven envoy on the continent. Did you crawl out from some countryside? Claire couldn't help but be dumbfounded. When the dean was young, she was not only one of the 12 most outstanding elven envoys in the Odisha Empire known as the 12 Knights, but she was also active in the front lines during the Lombard War that swept across the entire continent. Who doesn't know the Dusk Witch? Noah was speechless. So it was like that. No wonder when Noah expressed that he didn't know Grey Vath, Grey Vath had a funny expression. Was that witch really that famous? Aren't you the dean's disciple? How come you don't know anything? Claire looked at Noah strangely. Don't tell me you don't even know what a witch is. Noah laughed dryly, letting Claire know the answer. You've become the disciple of the continent's strongest elf user, but you don't even know who your master is. You can't even summon the saintess contracted spirit even after forming a contract with her. I really don't know what to say. Claire sighed and solemnly raised a finger. Listen carefully. The so-called witch is a witch who can form a contract with a magical elf. A magical elf. It was a type of spiritual structure that was extremely different from humans and elves. It was said that it was absolutely impossible for elven envoys to tame them and form a contract with them. Forming a contract with such an elf was almost the same as an ordinary human using his hands and feet to tame a wild tiger in the forest. It was impossible. However, the world was big and full of strange things. There were ordinary humans who could tame wild tigers in the forest with their hands and feet. There were also elven envoys who could form a contract with magical elves. And elven envoys who could form a contract with magical elves were usually called witches. Grey Vaz was called the Dusk Witch because of her valiant strength and active battle record, and also because she had the qualifications of a witch who could form a contract with magical elves. Not only that, Claire looked at Grey Vaz's portrait with some longing in her eyes. The Dean was also the champion of the Elven Sword Dance Festival 24 years ago. Elven Sword Dance Festival. Noah's heart moved. Noah had also heard of this term. It was known as the world's largest and best sacrificial ceremony. When this sacrificial ceremony was mentioned, one had to mention an existence. The Elven King. They governed the various elements that made up the world and stood at the peak of the elemental elf world. At the same time, they were the peak existence that ruled over all elves. Just like in the world of the shaped moon, Gaia managed the planet and Alea managed the humans, the Elven King managed the elements of the human world and the elemental elf world. Without the Elven King, there would be no elements in this world. They were such important existences. Chapter 953. Noah didn't know if the Elven Kings of this world could be compared to Gaia and Alea. Noah only knew that in this world, the Elven Kings who were in charge of managing the various elements of the human world and the elemental world were existences at the peak. Just like how gods were to the humans. To the humans and elves of this world, the Elven Kings were synonymous with gods. And there were a total of 5 Elven Kings. Fire Elven King, Volcanic. Wind Elven King, Bevel. Earth Elven King, Rod Leah. Water Elven King, Isalia Shiva. Holy Elven King, Alexander. The 5 Elven Kings were in charge of each of the basic elements of this world, namely fire, wind, earth, water, and holy. These 5 elements brought blessings to humans and elves. So to the people of this world, the 5 Elven Kings were godlike existences. It was said that in this world, there were 5 witch concubines who directly served the 5 Elven Kings. These 5 witch concubines who directly served the 5 Elven Kings were called Elven Concubines. The Elven Concubines were in charge of serving the Elven Kings and conveying the Elven Kings' will to the world. And the Elven Sword Dance Festival was a sacrificial ceremony for the 5 Elven Kings. In this ceremony, the best elves from each country would compete in a sword dance. They would use the most beautiful sword dance to satisfy the Elven King and determine the strongest Elven envoy. The strongest Elven envoy would be able to make a wish to the Elven King. No matter what the wish was, it would be fulfilled. At first, when he heard about the Elven Sword Dance Festival, Noah even had some thoughts. After all, although the nature was different, the Elven Sword Dance Festival of this world was similar to the Holy Grail War of the Type Moon world. They both had to compete to decide the winner. After the winner was decided, a wish could be fulfilled. Furthermore, both of them were rituals. The difference was that the Elven Sword Dance Festival was more like a large-scale carnival, while the Holy Grail War was a pure killing game. The Elven Sword Dance Festival is held at irregular intervals. Only when the Elven King wants to hold it will the Elven concubines convey the Elven King's will and make preparations, Claire continued to explain. In the past 30 years, the Elven Sword Dance Festival has been held 3 times. They were held 3 years ago, 15 years ago, and 24 years ago. The headmaster participated in the Elven Sword Dance Festival 24 years ago, and became the champion of that festival at the age of 15. That can't be right, right? Noah was just about to nod when he suddenly thought of something and shuddered. If Grey Vaz was already 15 years old 24 years ago, doesn't that mean that the witch is almost 40 years old now? This was not something that could be ignored. First of all, Grey Vaz looked like she was in her 20s or 30s. How could she be in her 40s? What's more, Grey and Vaz had displayed their powerful elven abilities in front of Noah more than once. However, everyone knew that the power of an elven envoy would begin to decline after reaching its peak. The age of decline was about 25 years old. If Grey Vath was really around 40 years old, then her power as an elven envoy would have completely declined, right? How could she still have the title of the strongest elven envoy on the continent? Did you forget that the winner of the Elven Sword Dance Festival can make a wish to the Elven King? Claire reminded. I heard that the headmaster made a wish to the Elven King for eternal youth. No matter how much time passed, her appearance would not age, her body would not decline, and her power as an elven envoy would always be at its peak. Therefore, she had already surpassed the age of the highest elven envoy. That's possible. Noah couldn't help sweating. No wonder the witch felt that she was old when she lost to me. So it wasn't just for show. Lose to you. Claire blinked her eyes strangely. What did she lose to you in? No, nothing. Noah scratched his cheek, then pointed to another portrait and changed the topic. Then, who is that person? Next to the young Grey Vath, there was another portrait. She had long black hair that reached her waist like a waterfall, and she was wearing an exotic costume that looked like a witch's costume. Compared to Grey Vath, that girl looked even younger. However, that girl could be placed next to the portrait of Grey Vath, who was known as the strongest elven envoy on the continent. Her identity was definitely not ordinary. You don't even know her. Noah didn't know if it was an illusion. If Claire was surprised when Noah said that he didn't know about Grey Vath's life, then she was angry now. It's understandable that you don't know about the headmaster's life. After all, it was something that happened many years ago. However, you don't even know the strongest sword dancer. Are you still an elven envoy? What are you angry about? Noah raised his eyebrows. Don't tell me that she's still your idol. That's right. Claire admitted generously. Can't I? I didn't say that I can't. Noah asked curiously. However, since she can become the idol of an unruly young miss like you, she must have a great background. Isn't that obvious? Claire raised her eyebrows and glared at Noah. That's the elf envoy who dominated the Elf Sword Dance Festival 3 years ago when she was only 14 years old. Everyone called her the strongest sword dancer. Not only me, many elf envoys in active service were captivated by her beautiful sword dance. Even the elf envoys who lost to her were attracted by her. What's so strange about me worshipping her? The strongest sword dancer. Noah nodded in understanding. Then, what's her name? Claire raised her head, her eyes full of bright light as she spat out this name in a loud voice. Liena Subble. When this name entered Noah's ears from Claire's mouth, Noah suddenly felt his heart beat faster. An indescribable intuition like a bolt of lightning flashed through Noah's heart. Noah's eyes narrowed as a pair of pitch-black pupils flashed. There was no way that Noah didn't recognize this feeling. Surprisingly, it was the hint that the world had given Noah when he had obtained information related to the whereabouts of the world fragment. In other words, the world fragment that was lost in this world was very likely related to the strongest sword dancer. He didn't expect that he would obtain information related to the whereabouts of the world fragment in a place like this. This was truly an unexpected gain. Liena Subble is the most popular of the Elven Sword Dance Festivals. In our Osea Empire, her popularity can even be compared to the strongest elven envoy on the continent, the Dean of the Academy. She has become the object of admiration in almost everyone's hearts. Claire spoke without stopping. You actually don't even know the strongest sword dancer. You've been an elven envoy for so long in vain. Sorry, I haven't been an elven envoy for very long. Noah laughed bitterly. He suppressed the restless feeling in his heart and the corners of his mouth lifted slightly. However, I'll remember her name. Liena Subble, I must meet you. On the side, Claire saw Noah lift the corners of his mouth and suddenly emit a powerful presence. She didn't know why, but her pretty face suddenly reddened and her heartbeat sped up. You. If a guy like you were in front of Liena Subble, you would definitely be beaten to a pulp. Claire's face was red. I don't think that you're very handsome like this. Noah immediately blinked and looked at Claire with a strange expression. Being stared at by Noah like this, Claire's pretty face became redder and redder, redder and redder. In the end, her embarrassment turned into anger. Don't keep staring at me like this. Pervert. Beast. As she shouted, the elven mark on the back of one of Claire's hands lit up. It seemed that this unruly young miss was planning to use violence to cover up her excessive embarrassment. Just as Noah felt a bit speechless and was about to give Claire a hard knock on the head, an elegant voice with a sense of superiority suddenly sounded. It's too noisy, Claire Lucio. Chapter 954. You're too noisy, Claire Lucio. Accompanied by such an elegant voice, the light on the elven mark in Claire's hand paused for a moment. An unlucky expression appeared on her young but rather cute face as if she had encountered something bad. It was Noah's first time seeing such an expression on Claire's face. Even when facing a male elf user like himself, this pure and innocent young lady didn't reveal such a blatant expression. Who could make this barbaric young lady reveal such an unlucky expression? With such curiosity, Noah turned around and looked at the source of the voice. Then, a young lady entered Noah's field of vision. You must keep quiet in the library. This is etiquette that ordinary people know. With such a sentence, the young lady walked towards Noah and Claire with graceful steps. And as nobles, we should pay more attention to etiquette than ordinary people. If you don't even know this little bit of etiquette, you don't have the face to call yourself a noble. Claire's face darkened after hearing the young lady's words. As for Noah, he sized up the young lady in front of him. She was an extremely beautiful young lady. The young lady had gorgeous light blonde hair that reached her waist. Her hair was also decorated with a long purple ribbon that curled between the strands of hair, setting off an inexplicable sense of nobility. The young lady's appearance was rather pure and refined. Her pretty face was exquisite as if it was meticulously drawn. Her eyes were like a pair of green gems that emitted a faint glow from time to time. She was such a beautiful girl. At this moment, an elegant smile hung on her beautiful face that was as exquisite as a painting. She stroked her long golden hair with one hand, causing it to flutter back and forth in the air. It was quite pleasing to the eye. Noah could be considered to have seen many noble young ladies. However, those who could perfectly set off the noble temperament were Lilith, Erica, Laius, and Rin Enbin. Similarly, the young lady in front of him could also be considered one. And behind this young lady, there was another young lady. A young girl wearing a light-made uniform with wavy lace, with neatly combed black hair and a small white headdress on her head. Maid? Noah was stunned. Why are there maids in Alicia Elf Academy? While Noah was stunned, Claire coldly snorted and spoke without any trace of politeness. Don't impose your so-called aristocratic etiquette on me, Lindley Laurenfrost. I'm tired of it. Ah, so you're saying that I've already mentioned it to you many times. The noble Lady Claire called Lindley laughed. I've said it so many times and you still don't understand. As expected, you're still a child. As she spoke, the girl named Lindley purposely glanced at a part of Claire's body that wasn't protruding at all. She snickered, causing Claire's eyes to widen and her face to redden. Of course, this time, Claire wasn't embarrassed, but angry. Are you here to pick a fight? Lynn Siley didn't even have the time to speak when the female servant standing not far behind her laughed softly and said, Eldest Miss just wanted to greet you. Caw. Carol. Lindley's elegant posture was defeated in an instant. She raised her fist as if she was very embarrassed, and lightly knocked on the maid's back. You. What nonsense are you saying now? Ma. The maid named Carol smiled as she endured her young Miss's punches that didn't have any strength behind them. Really, eldest Miss has always been so uncanny. What are you talking about? Claire turned her head away. Then it would have been better if you said that from the start. Why did you have to act so high and mighty? That's not high and mighty. Linley said angrily. As a noble, you should maintain your elegance at all times. Haven't you been taught this before? Looking at Linley's angry expression, Noah smiled bitterly in his heart. Looks like I really misjudged her this time. She's just an ordinary girl. However, this kind of Linley made Noah feel a sense of intimacy. At this time, Linley deliberately coughed to cover up her loss of composure. Then she noticed Noah and her beautiful eyebrows twitched slightly. You're the rumored male elf messenger. I am indeed an elf messenger. Noah narrowed his eyes. But I'm definitely not the male elf messenger you've heard of in the rumors. God knows, in this academy, what kind of rumors had Noah become? There were even rumors of 3 heads, 6 arms, and 8 legs. If he admitted it here, then Noah could really go to the Rare Animal Protection Association or the World Heritage Protection Association to apply for a place to stay. That's true. Linley did not maintain a fearful and curious attitude towards Noah like other girls. Instead, she treated him like an ordinary person. She put her face in front of Noah's face, looked at him for a while, and smiled sweetly. Your looks are not bad, very good. You have the qualifications to stand next to me, the eldest daughter of the Lorenfrost family. Ha! Noah was puzzled. Doesn't that mean, if I'm not good-looking, I can't stand next to you? Isn't that obvious? Linley raised her head, one hand on her waist, and a confident smile on her face. To be able to stand next to me, Linley Lorenfrost, how can you not have a passable appearance? As soon as these words fell, Carol, who had been hiding behind Linley, laughed out loud. Young Miss wants to be friends with you. Caw. Carol. Linley's pretty face blushed, as if her thoughts were seen through. If you talk nonsense again, I won't cook for you tonight. Carol was shocked. She pitifully pulled on Lynn Siley's clothes. No, young miss, if young miss doesn't cook for me, I will starve to death. Humph, it's good that you know. Linley's heart seemed to soften, and her tone relaxed. If you are obedient, I will add more food for you tonight. If you sleep in tomorrow, I will also wake you up. Young miss. Carol suddenly looked extremely touched. Little did she know, after hearing the conversation between the two, Noah was speechless. Why did the young Miss, Linley, have to cook for her own maid, and also be responsible for waking up the maid who slept in? Why would the maid not be able to survive without the young Miss cooking? What a development full of complaints. However, Noah still had a good impression of Linley. The witches in this academy were really too pure, so pure that when Noah, a male elven user, appeared, it immediately caused all kinds of gossip and rumors to fly in the minds of these young miss who did not care about worldly affairs, causing Noah to be badly battered. However, Noah had no way to make things difficult for her. He couldn't lose his temper at her just because she was too pure, right? If he did that, then he wouldn't be Noah. Only Linley didn't treat Noah as a romantic and gossipy character in other people's rumors. She looked at Noah with her own eyes, and there was no element of discrimination in it. She was just purely curious and interested in Noah. For Noah, who was treated differently in this academy and couldn't make things difficult, this was really no different from redemption. However, this girl didn't seem to be very frank. That maid called Carol, on the other hand, translated her young Mrs. thoughts very cleanly. Ah. Noah rubbed his head and smiled at Linley. Anyway, since we know each other, then please give me more advice. Linley was slightly startled, and then reacted, unable to hide her nervousness. Yes. Yes. Please give me more advice. Why? Why did the two of you suddenly become friends? Claire, who was left out to the side, couldn't bear to be left out and interrupted, glaring at Linley. You suddenly ran out to introduce yourself to others, and even left me out to the side. As expected of a dog thief. Who are you calling a dog? Linley glared at Claire. You're the one who's an airport. 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 Claire's face suddenly distorted. That look was as if she had been poked in a sore spot. Chapter 955. Suddenly, the atmosphere in the library became somewhat sinister following the interaction between Claire and Linley. Seeing Claire and Linley glaring at each other, Noah couldn't help but be stunned. Is the relationship between these two that bad? There's no such thing. Carol, who had hidden beside Noah at some point, laughed without a care. Miss Claire and Miss Claire are childhood friends who have a very good relationship. They've been close since they were young. Close. Noah helplessly pointed at Claire and Linley, who were baring their teeth at each other, as if they wanted to swallow each other whole. You call this close? Yes. Carol smiled innocently. Very close, right? Okay. Noah really didn't know what to say. However, just as Noah was about to shut his mouth, Claire and Linley were about to display their close relationship. You really came to pick a fight, Claire said with incomparable anger. In that case, I won't be polite. With that, the elven mark on the back of Claire's hand flashed with red light. Guardian of the red flames, watchman of the sleepless furnace, here to fulfill the blood contract, listen to my orders. A surge of flames accompanied Claire's contractual chant and suddenly appeared in front of her, rolling into a vortex. Within the whirlpool of flames, the fire cat spirit, whose entire body was covered in flames, slowly appeared. It landed on the ground and let out a ferocious roar in Linley's direction. You should be the one picking a fight. Linley shouted, not to be outdone. Don't think that you're the only one who can summon elves. With that, a faint blue light gradually rose from Linley's body. That was a cold light that caused the surrounding temperature to drop sharply. Chilling ice-fanged beast, heartless hunter of the forest, here to fulfill the blood contract, listen to my orders. As if falling from the sky, a whirlwind mixed with ice and snow suddenly rolled up from above Linley and abruptly descended. After spinning a circle on the ground like a gust of wind, it condensed together and turned into a block of solid ice. Within the solid ice, a white wolf with beautiful fur and ice and snow all over its body opened its pair of crystal-like eyes and suddenly shook. Bang! With a loud explosion, the ice that wrapped around the beautiful white wolf exploded, turning into ice shards that fell to the ground. That's... Noah said in surprise. A high elf. Yes. Carol said with a smile. That's miscontracted elf, magic ice elf Fenrir. With his outstanding perception ability, Noah could judge the elven rank of the fire cat and ice wolf based on their aura and aura. However, even without the ability to sense, people could still easily determine the level of elves under normal circumstances. There were generally two ways to judge an elven rank's rank. One was to judge based on the elf's divine might. Of course, the higher the rank of the elf, the greater the power, and the more powerful the divine might. Therefore, as long as one felt the divine might of the elf users could generally easily judge an elf's rank. The other method was based on the appearance. An elf's rank and appearance were closely related. Low-rank elves generally didn't have an obvious appearance, or only had a simple structure. For example, the light balls, will-o'-the-wisps, mist, and the like that Noah had seen before, were all low-rank elves. Elves with extremely small bodies like fireflies and small lizards, whose body structures were quite simple, were similarly low-rank elves. Middle-rank elves could already have an obvious appearance, and their bodies were much larger than low-rank elves. For example, the stone giant that Noah encountered when he first came to this world was a middle-rank elf. As for high-rank elves, elves of this rank usually existed in the form of wild beasts, magical beasts, or ferocious beasts. For example, Claire's fire cat elf. For example, Linley's magic ice elf. If nothing unexpected happened, these elves with animal forms were all high elves. Noah had even heard that among the elves, there was an elf that had the exact same appearance as a human. Those elves with human forms had power that even high-rank elves couldn't compare to. Not only were they the highest-rank elves in the entire elemental elf world, but they were also the rarest and were called the highest-rank elves. Although high-rank elves weren't as rare as the highest-rank elves, they weren't common goods. Basically, except for those high-rank nobles who had high-rank elves that had been passed down for generations to contract, ordinary elf users couldn't find such high-rank elves even if they wanted to contract high-rank elves. In the end, Claire's and Linley's contracted elves were both high-rank elves. Although Noah wasn't surprised, he was quite surprised. The family background of these two girls was definitely not ordinary. Of course, this wasn't something that Noah should be concerned about. What are you planning to do? Noah sighed. This is the library. If you start fighting here and damage those precious books, you won't be able to get away with just a few words of punishment. Claire and Linley were speechless at the same time. Don't think that these two girls' contracted elves didn't have much ability just because they weren't big. The power of high-rank elves was enough to rival large dragon beasts. Once they got serious, it was a bit of an exaggeration to say that they could destroy everything, but it was only a matter of time to turn a building into ruins. Whether it was Claire's Scarlet or Linley's Fenrir, they were both high-rank elves. If they started fighting here, the library would either be burned to the ground or shattered into ice shards. At that time, these two girls would be in big trouble. Humph. Linley turned her head away and brushed her long hair that reached her waist. I'll let you off today, Claire Lucio. Next time, it won't be so easy. I should be the one saying that. Claire glared at Linley like an angry little wild cat. Linley Lauren Frost, next time, I'll definitely burn you to ashes. The two girls looked at each other, then both snorted coldly and turned their heads away. Seeing this scene, Noah couldn't help but laugh. Perhaps it was really as Carol said. Claire and Linley's relationship was quite good. That might be the case. Because Noah didn't need to attend classes, when Claire and Linley both went to class, he was still hiding in the library, looking for books related to the Holy Maiden and the Holy Sword. However, no matter which book it was, even if it mentioned the Holy Maiden and the Holy Sword, they were all written in the form of legends. There was no basis at all and it couldn't be completely believed. Thus, Noah stayed in the library for an entire day, but didn't gain anything at all. It wasn't until almost dusk that Noah walked out of the library. He raised his hand and stared at the elven engravings that looked like swords crisscrossing, forming an extremely complicated pattern. What's wrong with you? Naturally, no one would answer Noah's question. Noah could only give up. He lifted his feet and was about to walk out when the sound of hurried footsteps rang out. Wait! The male elven user over there. Upon hearing the voice, Noah subconsciously stopped in his tracks, turned his head, and looked in the direction of the voice. He saw Alice running in Noah's direction. After stopping, she immediately spoke while panting. It's good that you haven't left yet. What's wrong? Noah raised his eyebrows and said with a smile that wasn't a smile. Let's make it clear first, I'm not waiting for the sky to turn dark to hunt women. It's best that you're not. Alice glared at Noah before straightening her body. She coughed and stammered, You're right. I'm here to tell you about your residence. Oh. Noah's interest was slightly piqued. Then where am I staying? As soon as these words were spoken, Alice's beautiful face turned slightly red. She lowered her head and opened her mouth to speak in a mosquito's voice. My room, huh? Noah almost couldn't believe his ears. What did you say? Alice bit her lip and looked angrily at Noah as she shouted loudly. You're staying in my room. Noah was really confused. What kind of development was this? Chapter 956. As an academy that specialized in nurturing elven users, not only did the Elven Academy own a vast elven forest, but there were also teachers who were as strong as the Elven Knights of the Empire. There were 3 grades in the Elven Academy, and each grade had a different class. The Mole class was where the most outstanding students of each grade would study. The Crow class was the exact opposite. Everyone in the class was problematic. Alice was a good student in the Weasel class. It was worth mentioning that Claire and Linley were both students of the Crow class. Under such circumstances, the students of the Elven Academy lived in different dormitories according to their classes. Alice's room was naturally in the Mole class dormitory. Under Alice's lead, Noah walked into the dormitory of the Mole class, where only pure and clean girls lived. Furthermore, they were all outstanding students. Noah's expression was somewhat helpless. Why did things turn out like this? Is there something you're unhappy about? Alice's face was tense as she led the way, not letting Noah see her blushing face. I'm the one who should be the most unhappy, right? Then why did you let me stay in your room? Noah rolled his eyes. If you're unhappy, why don't you just leave me be? That won't do. Alice's answer was firm. Although you're a male elven user, we have the responsibility to take care of you as a student of the academy. We can't just watch you live in the wilderness or on a tree. But you don't have to live in the female dormitory, do you? Noah asked curiously. Didn't you warn me not to have any ideas about the female dormitory? That's true, but other than you, all the elven users are female. There's no reason to build a male dormitory just for you, right? Alice said without turning her head. And I don't have enough time to build a good house for you. The previous one took me 3 hours. That was my limit. I'm the leader of the Wind King Knights, and I have to patrol and go to school every day. There's nothing I can do about it. All right. Noah rubbed his eyes. Then why stay in your room? If I let you stay in a room alone, with no one watching over you, who knows if you will sneak into the dormitory students' rooms to do something when they are asleep? Alice pouted. And the other students definitely won't be willing to live with you. Plus, there has to be someone watching over you. Other than me, is there a better candidate? Noah really wanted to tell Alice that if she let him live alone, he wouldn't do anything. However, as the only physically and mentally healthy male in an academy full of pure and innocent young girls, if he were to say this, it was estimated that 99 out of 100 people would not believe him, and the remaining one would only be half convinced. At the thought of this, Noah felt weak all over. Why don't you just let me continue living outside? I already said that I will not allow the students of the academy to fall into such dire straits, Alice said in an unquestionable tone. Or do you think I'm that kind of person? No, I know that you are a serious person. Noah laughed bitterly. However, at this time, being rigid is not a good thing. As they spoke, Noah and Alice arrived at the second floor of the Mole dormitory and came to a door. Standing in front of the door, Alice placed one hand on the doorknob, but did not open the door for a long time. Instead, she turned her head uneasily and looked at Noah. I'll say this first. Letting you stay here is only because there has to be someone watching over you. There's no other meaning. Noah scratched his face and asked carefully. What are you trying to say? I mean, this is something that can't be helped. Alice looked up at Noah with a pair of watery eyes, her heart swaying with shyness. I'm definitely not the kind of woman who would casually invite a man into her room. Hearing this, Noah was slightly taken aback, then laughed. Oh. Alice was flustered. You. What are you laughing at? Nothing. Noah shrugged. It's just that I feel that you don't have to worry. Although I haven't known you for a long time, and we haven't interacted much, I already know how serious you are. I don't think that you're that kind of woman. That's good. Alice heaved a sigh of relief. Seeing this, Noah sighed in his heart. The leader of the night troupe looked so strict on the surface, but in reality, she was just an ordinary and cute girl. As a pure girl who had never been so close to a male stranger, it was natural for her to be concerned about how the opposite sex looked at her. Especially for a serious girl like Alice, she was even more concerned about her image in the eyes of others. It had to be said that this Alice was really quite cute. Gotcha. Alice opened the door to her room with a soft creak. Her voice was a little nervous as she spoke in a mosquito-like voice. Come in. Seeing how nervous Alice was, Noah found it funny and walked into the room. What entered Noah's eyes was an unexpected room. The floor was pink. The home arranged in the room has a table and chair for dining and a table and chair for rest. In addition, there were decorative murals hanging on the walls. There were potted plants in the corner, and there were even a few dolls on a bench. It looked quite girlish. There were also 4 rooms in the room. One was a kitchen without a door. The other was a bathroom connected to the washroom. There were also 2 rooms side by side, and the doors were tightly shut. Those should be the rooms that the people who lived here used to sleep. The student dorms in Alicia Elven Academy were all 2-person dorms. This meant that Alice also had her own roommate. After leading Noah into the room, Alice said to Noah, "My roommate has temporarily left the academy to carry out a mission. He will only be back in a few weeks. I am unable to arrange a specific residence for you at the moment. However, I will propose some plans to the dean. I hope that your problem can be solved before my roommate returns." Noah nodded unconcernedly and continued to look around, admiring Alice's room bit by bit. Seeing how seriously Noah was looking at her room, Alice became shy. Don't keep staring. There's nothing strange, no. Noah laughed out loud. It's just that I thought your room would be very simple. I didn't expect it to have the scent of a girl. Scent. Alice was shocked. She subconsciously placed her hand on her sword and spoke with a red face. You actually intend to smell me in my room? Beast. Please, can you at least not choose other words to listen to? Noah felt a headache coming on. I'm starting to doubt if you can really lead a team of knights like this. I'm also starting to doubt if bringing you to my room was a good choice. Alice glared at Noah, her face still a little hot. In any case, you can make your own arrangements here. However, you are not allowed to enter my room. After saying that, Alice was just about to turn around when she seemed to have thought of something. She turned back and looked at Noah. By the way, if you don't want to die, it's best that you don't enter my roommate's room. After saying that, Alice hid in her room in a panic. With a bang, she slammed the door shut. Noah could only look on helplessly. All of a sudden, Noah felt a line of sight coming straight from the window and falling on him. Noah reflexively turned his head and looked out of the window. There was only a building with the moon as the background. Noah frowned slightly. Was it an illusion? Under the dark moonlight, a girl with black wings on her back floated in the air. She looked down at the dormitory of the mole class and smiled sweetly. Your senses are so sharp. If I looked for one more second, I would definitely be discovered. Saying this, the young girl put her finger between her lips and smiled happily. Let me play with you then. Chapter 957. When he regained consciousness, Noah realized that he was floating in midair. His body was illusory. His surroundings were dark. He felt like he was in a strange place. However, his consciousness was still quite clear. Under such circumstances, Noah witnessed the pinnacle of the battle in the dark space from the perspective of God. Roar! In the dark fortress, the Demon King, whose body was burning with black flames, let out a roar that did not sound like a human's voice. In his hand, he gripped a completely black knight's sword tightly. Dense black gas surged around his body, bringing with it gusts of wind that swirled in the surrounding space. Finally, it gathered on the sword. Roar! In the low roar that sounded like a ferocious beast, the Demon King, whose body was shrouded in ominous black gas, suddenly shook his sword-wielding arm. Like a flash of black lightning, his body instantly shot forward. In front of the Demon King of Disaster was a young girl holding a steel sword shining with silver light. She was called the Saintess of Salvation by the later generations. She fearlessly pointed her sword at the Demon King that was charging towards her. Her body was surrounded by a beautiful phosphorescent light called Divine Might, which was completely different from the Demon King's. The black lightning that shot toward the Saintess of Salvation was terrifyingly fast. One could only vaguely see a black line flash in front of their eyes. The Demon King, whose body was shrouded in ominous black gas, arrived in front of the Saintess. He mercilessly slashed with the Black Knight's sword at the Saintess' head with a sonic boom. Clang! In the next moment, the Black Knight's sword and the shining silver sword collided fiercely, setting off a shocking shockwave that shook the surroundings. Then, the heart-trembling collision began. Clang, clang, clang! Along with the Demon King's ferocious roar, the pitch-black knight's sword was swung out like a heavy hammer. Using the most violent method, it mercilessly slashed towards the delicate and pitiful girl. However, no matter how heavy the slashes were, the existence who was known as the Saintess of Salvation by the later generations was fearless. She raised her shiny silver steel sword and continuously welcomed the heavy sword that was swinging at her. She poured all of her divine power into her elven device and repelled the violent yet rough slashes of the Demon King amidst the crisp clangs of clashing sounds. Rather than saying that it was a beautiful clash of swords, it would be more accurate to say that one side was simply venting their violence, while the other side was doing their best to defend against the other side's attacks. In the eyes of some ordinary people and even in the eyes of ordinary elves, such a battle of one attacking and one defending was rather exciting. However, for Noah, who had once faced a god and even killed a god, it was a little too simple. This was because Noah could easily see that just like when he faced Hercules in the form of a servant, the Saintess was also waiting for an opportunity in the battle with the Demon King. She was waiting for an opportunity to kill him in one strike. And this opportunity came very quickly. Roar! Perhaps it was because it was furious that it couldn't take down a weak girl for a long time. In order to slay the foolish girl who challenged it, the Demon King raised its pitch-black knight sword high up and gathered all of its strength into the next strike. However, this long accumulation of power finally laid a decisive foundation for the Saintess to defeat the Demon King. Clang! Suddenly, the shining silver steel sword in the Saintess' hand suddenly shone with a dazzling light. Like a ray of moonlight flashing through space, it swept forward with a pleasant sword sound. At such a close distance, the Demon King who was still accumulating power with his elven device raised high couldn't dodge at all. He could only watch as the moonlight slash landed on his body. Poochie! Without any obstruction, the sharp steel sword directly pierced through the Demon King's chest, piercing through the heart of the male elven envoy who brought unimaginable disaster to the continent. Whing! The shining silver steel sword suddenly trembled and burst out with a shockingly strong light, completely enveloping the Demon King's body in the light. Roar! In the end, the Demon King only had time to let out a hair-raising roar. In the dazzling light, his body gradually disappeared. Clang! Then, the pitch-black knight's sword in the hands of the Demon King of Disaster fell down and stabbed into the ground upside down. At this moment, the Demon King was eliminated. And the scene of the Saintess who saved the world powerlessly sitting on the ground became the last scene in the legend of the Saintess and the Demon King that spread throughout the continent. Similarly, it also became the last scene in the eyes of Noah, who watched the entire process from the perspective of God. As his consciousness gradually returned to his mind, Noah woke up from his sleep and slowly opened his eyes. Because he didn't draw the curtains, when the sky began to brighten, the darkness in the pink room was gradually expelled. Noah, who was lying on the sofa with a quilt covering his body, didn't have a bright look in his eyes. Instead, he looked a little gloomy. After a while, he finally regained his senses. He straightened up and covered his forehead with his hand. His deep eyes flickered with slight ripples. Is it that dream again? The dream of the final battle between the Saintess and the Demon King. This time, Noah did not wake up because of the sudden dream. Not only did he clearly know that he was dreaming, but he also witnessed the final battle between the Saintess and the Demon King from the perspective of God, which no one could discover until the very last moment. Raising his hand and looking at the elven seal on the back of his hand, Noah extracted the divine aura from the divine aura source in his body bit by bit and poured it into the seal. Wang, with a slight tremor, the elven seal emitted a weak light. Cold Steel Queen, holy sword that slays demons and demons, become a sword of steel and bestow upon me divine power. The familiar contractual elven incantation sounded around him, causing the weak light to become even brighter. However, after a while, the bright light dimmed again until it completely disappeared and returned to its original state. Although he didn't have much hope, the failure of the summoning still made Noah smile helplessly. I've really made a contract with a troublesome elf. Just as he finished speaking, the sound of a door being opened echoed into Noah's ears. That was the sound of the door to Alice's room being opened. Good morning. Not knowing whether she was talking to herself or was subconsciously talking in her sleep, Alice's expression was hazy as she rubbed her eyes. She looked sleepy as she walked out of the room. Seeing this scene, Noah knew that Alice was probably still asleep. This was because Alice was wearing pajamas with polka dots printed on them. Her sky blue waist-length hair wasn't tied into a ponytail, but was instead let loose. This made Alice, who was usually very stern, look even more gentle and beautiful at this moment. The cute pajamas, coupled with Alice's cute appearance, made Noah's expression relax as he replied subconsciously. Good morning. Hearing this voice, Alice's body froze. Then, as if she finally remembered something very important, Alice maintained her stiff body as her neck slowly turned towards Noah's direction. When she saw Noah, her face slowly turned red. Looking at Noah lying on the sofa, then looking at herself in her pajamas, Alice's eyes began to well up with tears. Wah wah wah. With a sorrowful cry, Alice scurried back to her room and slammed the door shut. The corner of Noah's mouth twitched. It was just pajamas, was there a need to have such a big reaction? 30 minutes later, Alice came out of the room in her uniform and light clothes, with a knight's sword at her waist. The moment she came out, Alice's face flushed red as she pulled out the knight's sword at her waist and pointed it at Noah. Speak. What did you see? Noah knew that inexplicable trouble had come again. Just as Noah was about to subdue Alice, a series of hurried footsteps could be heard clearly from outside, followed by a series of violent knocks on the door. The next moment, a panicked voice suddenly sounded. Captain. Something happened. Alice's expression changed. Chapter 958. Until just now, Alice's face was flushed red with shame and indignation. The moment the flustered voice sounded outside the door, not only did her expression change, but the flush on her face also faded away, replaced by an incomparably stern expression. At this moment, Alice switched from an ordinary girl to the leader of the Wind King Knights, who protected the security and order of the Elven Academy. Without any hesitation, Alice stepped forward and opened the door. 2 girls appeared outside the door. The 2 girls were equipped with the same light armor and swords as Alice of the Wind King Knights. Obviously, these 2 girls were also members of the Wind King Knights. Leader. Looking at Alice, who opened the door, the 2 girls heaved a sigh of relief, but soon they spoke anxiously. Something happened. Leader. Calm down. Alice put her hands on the shoulders of the 2 girls, indicating for them to calm down. What happened? The 2 girls looked at each other and immediately seemed to have reached a consensus. They looked at Alice together and said this sentence in unison. In the Elven Forest, a large number of magical beasts suddenly rushed out and attacked the gate of the academy. You! What did you say? Alice cried out involuntarily. Magical beasts. Noah's heart moved, and he also stood up. Magical beasts. It was a species that was different from elves, but also lived in the elemental elf world. They didn't have the power to form a contract with humans, nor did they have the various abilities like elves. Strictly speaking, they should be a kind of wild beast. However, this kind of magical beast usually had a strange body structure and physical strength, much stronger than ordinary wild beasts. Many people said that magical beasts were a species born from the union of elves in the elemental elf world and wild beasts in the human world. However, this statement had never been confirmed. What was certain was that this kind of magical beast did indeed have physical strength and body structure that ordinary wild beasts didn't have. Rather than saying that it was the same kind of existence as tigers and lions, it was better to say that it was the same kind of existence as dinosaurs. Therefore, even if it didn't have the ability of elves, the threat of magical beasts to humans was much greater than ordinary wild beasts. Compared to some elves, it was not to be outdone. Like elves, magical beasts would also come to this world through the gate of the elemental elf world and live in the elven forest. Now, it seemed that a portion of the magical beasts living in the elven forest had suddenly attacked the academy. Alice, who knew that she could not afford to be careless, immediately spoke. Have all the knights gone over? Most of them are already there. The rest are still being notified, a young girl from the Knight Corps quickly said. Leader, should we ask the academy for help? In addition to the Wind King Knights, there were also teachers with strength comparable to the Empire's Elven Knights. If he asked them for help, it would probably make the situation much better, right? However, Alice shook her head. I don't know why, but the magical beasts suddenly began to attack the academy's gates. Who knows when other magical beasts will attack the academy from another direction? If we send all the academy's teachers to the gates, once other magical beasts break in, no one will be able to protect the academy's students and important secrets. Alice made a prompt decision. Send someone to report this matter to the dean and ask him to inform the teachers to be on guard against the magical beasts that might attack at any time. The magical beasts at the gates will be blocked by the Wind King Knights. In this way, even if we can't defend it, there are still teachers in the academy who can face the attack at any time. The 2 young girls from the Knight Corps hurriedly nodded, and one of them ran back. It seemed that she had gone to the dean's office. Let's hurry to the gates too. Alice called out to the remaining young girl from the Knight Corps, then turned around and looked at Noah with an extremely solemn expression. If you're willing to help, go to the academy and inform those students that if we can't defend the gates, you can let them take refuge. After leaving this sentence, Alice did not even wait for Noah's reply and directly ran out with the young girl from the Knight Corps. Noah, who silently watched Alice run away, narrowed his eyes slightly and also walked out of the door. Once out of the mole class's dormitory, Noah had yet to decide on a direction when a voice called out to him. "You look quite leisurely." Noah's footsteps paused, and he turned around to look at the source of the voice. In the direction of the academy, Grey Vase walked calmly in the direction of Noah's direction. "I thought you definitely went to the gates." Hearing the words of the continent's strongest elf envoy, Noah smiled indifferently. "In other words, the current situation is so urgent that you need to find me to help." "No, it's just magical beasts. They don't have the ability to attack this academy that specializes in nurturing elf envoys and has teachers who are comparable to the Empire's elf knights stationed there." Grey Vase cast her gaze in the direction of the gates. "It's just that those girls from the Wind King Knights probably don't have the ability to block the attack of the magical beasts." "Why would the magical beasts suddenly attack the academy?" Noah asked the question that he was concerned about. Could it be that the academy often receives attacks from the magical beasts in the elf forest? Since it's a building built in the elf forest, it's not strange for it to receive attacks from magical beasts, Grey Vase said with a calm expression. "It's just that the magical beasts in the elf forest are generally from the elemental elf realm through the gate and accidentally enter this world. If there are no accidents, they won't form a group. The Wind King Knights can easily deal with a single magical beast." Noah understood the meaning behind Grey Vase's words. Since the magical beasts in the elf forest usually acted alone, it could only be that someone was secretly manipulating them to suddenly attack in large numbers. "I've already sent people to investigate who's behind this." Grey Vase glanced at Noah. "As for the magical beasts at the gates, I'll leave it to you to deal with." Grey Vase's words left no room for doubt. It wasn't an order, nor was it a plea. It was like a teacher giving homework to a student. There was no reason for the student to not have to hand in the homework just because he said he didn't want to. Grey Vase could be considered Noah's mentor in the field of elven envoys. Since Grey Vase was giving homework to Noah, the content of the homework was obvious. Noah, who was keenly aware of Grey Vase's intentions, frowned. "Don't tell me you want me to use my contracted spirit to fight against a large number of magical beasts." With Noah's strength, it wasn't difficult to deal with a group of magical beasts. However, if he had to summon his contracted spirit to fight, it would be a different story. After all, Noah's contracted spirit couldn't be summoned at all. In response, Grey Vase said indifferently, "I've said it before. When you're in battle, your improvement speed is 1,000 times faster than normal." Grey Vase looked at Noah meaningfully. "Perhaps, only when you're in battle state will your amazing talent be displayed." After saying that, Grey Vase turned around and walked away. Looking at Grey Vase's back, Noah curled his lips. This hateful witch, when Noah arrived at the school square, what presented before him was chaos. Whoa! Magical beasts that were as big as giant dinosaurs and had all kinds of strange appearances were madly colliding with each other with their naturally huge bodies. The place where they collided was naturally the school gate. Dong 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 dong. With the fierce collisions of those magical beasts, heavy sounds vibrated in the air. However, the school gate wasn't attacked at all. Because a thin layer of light screen blocked the attacks of those magical beasts. Ugh! The elven envoys of the Wind King Knight Legion stretched out their hands toward the gate. Their hands were shining brightly, and their bodies were surging with the phosphorescence that represented divine power. They seemed to be supporting something bitterly and constantly transmitting divine power. Ha! Ha! At the head of the Wind King Knight Legion, Alice also stretched out a hand. Halos undulated in her hand, setting off waves of divine power fluctuations. She was also supporting bitterly. That thin layer of light screen was the enchantment created by the Wind King Knight Legion's elven magic. Noah looked outside the school gate and clenched his elven hand. Chapter 959. At the head of the Wind King Knights, Alice continuously instilled her divine power into her hands. Together with her companions, she used the enchantment created by elven magic to block the attacks of the magical beasts. But that was all. Due to the fact that they could only block the attacks of the magical beasts by putting all their manpower on defense, the Wind King Knights could no longer spare any manpower to attack the magical beasts. They could only passively endure the attacks of the magical beasts. If this continued, it would be impossible to defend against the attacks of the magical beasts when the divine power of all the elves present was exhausted. At the thought of this, Alice couldn't help but feel a little anxious. If this continued, it definitely wouldn't work. Someone had to stand up and repel the continuous attacks of the magical beasts. Otherwise, in a battle of attrition, the Wind King Knights would definitely be the first to fall. However, once too many people were drawn out to attack the magical beasts, the enchantment that was constructed would also weaken, causing it to be breached by the magical beasts. Alice had no way to back down now. However, Alice also understood that there was no time to continue hesitating. At that moment, Alice gritted her teeth and made a decision in her heart. "I'll leave this to you guys," Alice said loudly to the knights beside her. "I'll go crusade against the magical beasts." After saying that, Alice didn't give the knights any time to react. She immediately withdrew her divine power and dashed forward. "Leader." The elven envoys of the knights were shocked. The number of magical beasts attacking from the direction of the elf forest was about 20 to 30. With such a number of magical beasts, even the elven knights of the Empire couldn't deal with them alone. Only the elven envoys at the level of the 12 knight generals had the ability to charge into such a group of magical beasts alone. Although Alice's results and strength in the Elven Academy were considered top-notch, and she wasn't inferior to those regular elven knights, she was still far from the level of the 12 knight generals. Going to crusade against so many magical beasts alone was definitely a dead end. It was impossible that Alice didn't know how dangerous this was. However, other than Alice, who was the leader of the Wind King Knights, who else was suitable to stand up at this time? Clang! Alice unsheathed the knight's sword at her waist and charged towards the gate of the academy. She arrived at a place that was only separated from the magical beasts by a thin barrier of light. In the next moment, a surge of divine power surged from Alice's body, gradually turning into a whirlwind that swept into the air. A black figure slowly appeared in the middle of the whirlwind that had swept up into the air. "Come!" Alice raised one hand above her head, and her stern voice resounded throughout the entire space. "Magic Wind Elf, Smolf." As soon as the voice fell, the black shadow in the center of the whirlwind shook and a pair of wings suddenly spread out. Bang! Immediately, the whirlwind surrounding the black shadow was blown away, exposing the full appearance of the black shadow to the sunlight. It was an eagle. It was a very majestic eagle with turquoise body hair. That was Alice's contracted sprite. Magic Wind Elf, Smolf. A genuine high elf. Screech! With a sharp and resounding eagle cry, the magic wind elf named Smolf shot down from the sky. Against the gale, it gradually turned into an afterimage. Its speed was astonishingly fast. Brutal wind. As if their minds were connected, Alice raised one hand high and closed her eyes. The divine power all over her body converged on that raised hand, and she chanted an elven incantation like a ballad. "Bestow the magic spear that pierced through the heart of my archenemy to my hand." The magic wind elf that turned into an afterimage descended from the sky and turned into a whirlwind that suddenly landed on Alice's hand. Hum! A series of trembling sounds rang out from the ground. Whoosh! Gusts of gale swept in all directions. Alice only tightly grasped the whirlwind that landed on her hand, and with a spin, she faced the numerous magical beasts in front of her. And in Alice's hand, there was an extra spear. A spear that looked like it was used for rituals and ceremonies. Ha! Suddenly, Alice shouted and swung the ceremonial spear in her hand forward. Dong! A gust of gale suddenly appeared without any warning and turned into the most powerful wind wave. As if it could topple mountains and overturn seas, it surged forward violently. Bang! The magical beasts that were fiercely charging towards the gate of Elven Academy didn't have time to adjust their posture. Their bodies were directly penetrated through the barrier and hit by the gale that surged from the inside of the academy. As if they were hit by an invisible shockwave, they were all sent flying. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Alice dodged and leaped high into the air. She crossed the thin barrier and swept out of the gate. Wind! Overturn my enemy. Alice, who leaped into the air, chanted an elven magic incantation in an extremely hurried tone and swung the ceremonial spear down heavily. Wind King explosive array. Still, there wasn't even the slightest sign. The astonishing gale turned into a wave of impact. Like a tornado descending from the sky, it was like a huge drill that fell to the ground. Against the whistling sound of the wind, it landed on the ground. Bang! The ground that was directly hit by the storm, with the tornado as the center, exploded in all directions, rolling up the sand and dust in the sky, and bouncing the demonic beasts away again. This attack sent all the magical beasts that were attacking the gate of Elven Academy flying. At the same time, it also angered the magical beasts that had fallen to the ground. Roar! With a loud beast roar, a magical beast that looked like a snake suddenly shook from the ground and turned into the most direct attack. Its huge body shot towards Alice in the air. Alice was shocked and hurriedly raised the ceremonial spear in her hand to block in front of her body. But the huge body of the snake-like beast wasn't something that a small spear could block. Bang! With a dull thud, Alice let out a pained grunt as she was sent flying. Resisting the huge impact and pain from her body, Alice squeezed out a sound. Gale, blow, a slight gust of wind blew around Alice's body, but it was just enough to cause Alice's body to slowly come to a stop and float in the air. Swish! But at the same time, a huge tail suddenly lashed out from Alice's side. It cut through the air at an astonishing speed and landed heavily on Alice's body. Bang! With another muffled sound, a black shadow shot down from the air and smashed onto the ground, stirring up thick smoke and dust. Commander! Inside the academy, the Wind King Knights saw this scene with their own eyes and let out sorrowful cries. However, only Alice knew the truth. That blow didn't cause any harm to her at all. Because, at the critical moment, a figure suddenly appeared by Alice's side and pulled her into his arms. Then, he threw out an extremely powerful punch to meet the enormous tail that seemed to cover the sky and cover the sun. As a result, the person who took Alice into his arms shot down from the air due to the force of the collision. As for the huge tail, it was also blasted away. The owner of the huge tail was that snake-like magical beast just now. The gigantic magical beast that had been blasted away drew a perfect parabola in midair, and then fell into the large group of magical beasts in front of it, and was drowned by the rest of the magical beasts. Only then did Alice open her eyes. What was imprinted in Alice's eyes was a face. A face that she hadn't seen many times but was rather familiar with. You. Alice was stunned. The man who took Alice into his arms glanced at the magical beasts that were roaring at him, and a glint flashed across his dark and deep eyes. Leave the rest to me. With that, Noah put Alice down from his arms, and before Alice could react, he took steady steps and walked forward step by step. A burst of berserk divine might rose from the figure that was neither tall nor big, but it was abnormally tall and straight. Chapter 960. Roar, 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 roar. At this moment, the roars of numerous magical beasts resounded through the sky, echoing throughout the entire Alicia Elven Academy. Rumble. Without any hesitation, the magical beasts that were blown away by Alice's storm once again gathered in groups. Like a violent wave, their heavy footsteps repeatedly stomped on the ground, and as the ground shook, they surged in Noah's direction. If they were to be drowned by the horde of beasts, it was likely that anyone would end up being trampled to death. However, Noah's expression did not change at all as he looked at the rather shocking group of magical beasts swarming towards him. Noah had already faced this scene countless times. In the world of The Dark Bullet, Noah had faced thousands of protozoan virus legions. In the world of The God Slayer, Noah had faced thousands of wolves released by Marquis Warban. In the world of Looking for a Chance Encounter in a Dungeon, Noah had also faced monsters that could be said to be an army of thousands of men and horses. Compared to those magical beasts, there were only 20 or 30 of them, and they were only able to create such a shocking scene because of their large size. They were not intimidating at all. As though he didn't see the horde of magical beasts charging towards him, Noah raised his hand and faced the front. Gazing at the complicated elven seal, Noah spoke softly as if he was talking to himself. I don't know what happened to you, and I don't know what your current situation is, but in the dream, I can feel that fearless emotion and extraordinary power you had when you fought the Demon King with your previous master. So, I believe that you must know about me, just like me. Noah's voice was strong and powerful as he said this. It doesn't matter if you're the legendary holy sword that killed the Demon King, or just an unknown elf. If you really know about me, then answer me. Because I need you. As soon as he finished speaking, Noah clenched his outstretched hand into a fist. The endless divine power that surged around him gushed toward the elven mark like a flood that was released from a dam. Cold Steel Queen, the holy sword that slays demons, become a sword of steel, and bestow me with divine power. The elven language that represented the contract turned into a song that reverberated in the air. Clang! On the back of Noah's hand, the intricate elven seal bloomed with extremely bright light, illuminating the surroundings. Thus, the circuit to the elemental elven world was successfully established. In the past, Noah's summoning would always end in failure because he could not get a response from the elven contract in the elven world. However, this time, Noah clearly felt it. A faintly discernible presence appeared silently from the end of the circuit that connected the elven seal to the elemental realm and responded to Noah's call. Wang! At this moment, the elven seal in Noah's hand burst out with lightning. In that lightning, dense light particles slowly gathered together, and gradually condensed into form in Noah's hand. Immediately afterward, it was as if something had broken free from within, and the condensed light particles suddenly exploded. Bang! After a sound like glass breaking, the light particles that gathered in Noah's hand dissipated. However, a cold object appeared in Noah's hand and fell into his palm. Sword. It was a steel sword that was silver in color, inlaid with gold threads and crystals, and flowed with a layer of sacred silver light. On the blade of the steel sword, there were words inscribed in the ancient elven language, Terminus Estate, Protector of the World. Roar, 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 roar. The violent and chaotic roars of magical beasts rubbed against the air, causing the dangerous atmosphere to once again fill the entire space. Noah just raised his head and looked at the group of magical beasts charging at the forefront. A trace of coldness flashed across his deep eyes. Clang! A sword light that seemed to shake the world suddenly appeared in the space. It crossed the space at an amazing speed and directly swept toward the group of magical beasts charging at the forefront. Poochie! The group of magical beasts charging at the forefront was directly swept by the bright sword light. Accompanied by a clear tearing sound, their huge bodies were cut in half. Boom! The body of the magical beast that was cut in half fell heavily to the ground, causing a heavy sound and sand to fill the sky. The group of magical beasts charging with their companions at the forefront without any precaution were pulled down by the corpses that fell to the ground one after another. In a series of muffled landing sounds, they smashed to the ground one by one. This scene shocked all the elven envoys of the Wind King Knights led by Alice, and they stood rooted to the ground in shock. Even Noah looked at the steel sword in his hand in surprise. At this time, the steel sword shining with silver light was flowing with a layer of holy light under the situation where Noah poured a lot of divine power into it. Holding the holy sword that killed the demon king tightly, Noah could even clearly feel that the sword in his hand had a very clear pulse, as if it had a life of its own. It was tightly integrated with Noah's divine power. Under such circumstances, the divine power that Noah poured into the holy sword all turned into its power. Although he didn't know what kind of ability this holy sword had, it was impossible for ordinary elves to have the power to kill more than half of the magical beasts with just one blow. Because the person who wielded the sword was Noah, only then did Noah know what kind of power the steel sword in his hand had. To put it bluntly, as long as there was enough divine power, Noah even had the confidence to split a mountain peak with the holy sword in his hand. Is this your power? Noah slowly closed his eyes, feeling the pulse and power of the holy sword in his hand, and the corners of his mouth rose slightly. That's not all, right? Show me what you've got. The steel sword shining with silver light shook, as if responding to Noah's voice, and the holy light on it became more and more dazzling. Roar, 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 roar. At this time, those huge magical beasts stood up from the ground and rushed in from all directions toward Noah's direction. Whoosh! Noah maintained the state of closing his eyes, but with a step, his speed suddenly soared and flashed across the ground. The next second, the silver holy sword swept across the space and slashed at a magical beast beside him. Poochie! With the flash of the sword light, the huge magical beast's body was cut into two. In the academy, the members of the Wind King Knights could only see a sword light flashing back and forth among the magical beasts, repeatedly sweeping across the space. Poochie, poochie, poochie. Every time that sword light flashed in the space and swept across the magical beasts' bodies, the huge magical beasts would be cut into two at the waist. And the elf user who was waving the steel sword shining with silver light among the magical beasts kept his eyes closed, and his figure flashed back and forth nimbly. That scene was simply like an intoxicating dance. With Alice as the leader, all the members of the Wind King Knights were intoxicated by it. It didn't matter whether it was a male elf user. At this moment, Alice and the others were just admiring an intoxicating sword dance, and their hearts were brimming with emotions called touching. Unfortunately, that intoxicating sword dance appeared in a hurry and disappeared in an extremely hurry as well. When Alice and the others reacted, the world that was filled with the roars of the magical beasts and the tremors of the ground had unknowingly returned to silence. Those magical beasts that made the Wind King Knights badly battered all ended up dying without an intact corpse. The bodies that were cut in half at the waist were mixed together, and their original appearances couldn't be seen. Only the figure holding the steel sword shining with silver light was left standing in the middle of the magical beasts that had fallen to the ground. Under the rendering of the light of the holy sword, his figure was exceptionally sacred. Noah, who was immersed in his own world, opened his eyes and cast his gaze back to the silver holy sword in his hand. Looking at the sword inscription engraved on the holy sword, Noah opened his mouth slightly. World Protection Deity. Ashtar, the light circulating on the holy sword brightened slightly. It looked like it was responding to Noah's voice. Chapter 961. Alicia Elven Academy. In the dean's office, Gray and Vath were listening to Noah's report on the magical beast horde attacking the academy gate. Gray and Vath didn't think that Noah could repel the magical beast horde by himself. As mentioned before, if there were any elven users who could repel 20 to 30 magical beasts by themselves, it would only be the top elven users like the 12 Knights. Gray and Vath were not only the leader of the 12 Knights, but they were also known as the strongest elven user in the continent. To Gray and Vath, repelling a magical beast horde of that level wasn't a problem, let alone Noah who was stronger than Gray and Vath. What Gray and Vath really cared about was Noah's progress as an elven user. Therefore, when she heard that Noah had summoned a contracted elf and turned it into the most suitable elven device for himself, the strongest elven user in the continent with the title of Twilight, which showed a satisfied expression. Apart from that, she also sighed. You can turn a contracted elf into the most suitable elven device for yourself after summoning it for the first time. Gray and Vath looked at Noah and said with a faint smile. Sure enough, your improvement is the fastest when you're in battle mode. Hearing that, Noah curled his lips, but he also understood why Gray and Vath sighed like that. Although elven users could communicate with elves and exchange contracts to obtain the elves' power, it wasn't something that could be obtained effortlessly after contracting. Even after contracting elves, they still needed to study hard, practice, and practice to obtain power. For example, elven magic. As long as an elven user contracted an elf, they could use magic of the same attribute as the contracted elf. But being able to use and using were two completely different things. Only after going through rigorous elven magic training could an elven user use elven magic. The power that could be obtained after forming a contract with an elf was the same. Summoning elves required practice. Using elves required practice. Using elves' power required practice. In order to transform the elves into the most suitable elven magic device, one needed to cultivate as well. Let's just say that it happened in Alicia Elven Academy. Although Claire and Alice were able to use the elven equipment so easily, they thought that it was easy. In fact, in the entire Alicia Elven Academy, less than half of the students were able to use elven devices. Most of the senior students were able to use the elven device. However, in the lower grades, apart from Claire, Linley, and Alice, who were exceptionally talented in using elves and had contracts with high elves, less than 30% of the students in the lower grades had truly mastered the elven devices. However, in a battle situation, Noah, the God Slayer, would naturally grasp the method of battle. After summoning the contract spirit, as part of the instinct of the God Slayer, Noah understood what was the most suitable fighting style for him at that time. Therefore, in that instant, Noah naturally grasped the method to transform the elves into the most suitable elven device for him. All of this was due to the God Slayer's unparalleled talent in battle. Or rather, it could be said that it was his instinct in essence. Of course, Noah's amazing talent was also one of the reasons. If that's the case, there won't be a problem. Gray Vath heaved a sigh of relief, her expression more or less becoming dreamy. My goal can be achieved. After hearing Gray Vath's words, Noah remembered. Gray Vath had invited him to study in Alicia Elven Academy for a purpose. As for what that purpose was, Gray Vath had never mentioned it. No, it shouldn't be said that she didn't say it, but Gray Vath felt that it wasn't the right time to say it yet. Gray Vath had always been waiting for Noah's power in using elves to blossom. Now, Noah was finally able to use the elven device. Being able to use the elven device was an important step for an elven user to take charge of things. In other words, as an elven user, even if Noah wasn't outstanding, he could still be considered to have passed the test. Can you say it now? Noah asked. You were so kind to help me solve the problem of my identity, and even gave me guidance in using elves. What is it for? Gray Vath was silent. Gray Vath picked up the coffee on the table and took a sip. After a while, she said this. I want you to participate in the Elven Sword Dance Ceremony. Elven Sword Dance Ceremony. Noah frowned. Elven Sword Dance Ceremony. The ceremony to present the Sword Dance Ceremony to the Elven King. Gray Vath did so much for Noah just to let Noah participate in this ceremony. However, if this was really the case, then the question that Gray Vath asked about Noah's age when they first met would be answered. The power of an elven user would continuously decline after reaching its peak. The peak period of power development would be between the ages of 10 to 25. Therefore, the elves loved the things that young and pure elves offered the most. Therefore, the Elven Sword Dance ceremony had a rule that only elves under the age of 20 could participate. This rule didn't only apply to the Elven Sword Dance ceremony, but also to any important event where elves were sacrificed. Noah wasn't yet 20 years old, so he just happened to meet this rule. In 2 months, the Elven Sword Dance ceremony will be held in the elemental elf world, Grey Vath said to Noah. I hope you can participate in the Elven Sword Dance ceremony in 2 months and win. Why? Noah's frown deepened, and he asked directly. Why do you want me to participate in the Elven Sword Dance ceremony? Grey Vath was still silently sipping her coffee. After a while, she replied. Not only can the winner of the Elven Sword Dance ceremony fulfill a wish, but the country of the winner will also be protected by the Elven King, leading to the prosperity of the country. I hope you can represent the Ordesia Empire to participate in the Elven Sword Dance ceremony. Isn't this reason enough? Noah didn't answer. He only looked straight at Grey Vath. Noah's intuition told him that this reason was very likely one of the reasons why Grey Vath wanted him to participate in the Elven Sword Dance ceremony. There was also a very important reason that Grey Vath didn't say. Grey Vath didn't tell the truth, but she also didn't tell a lie. It was just that Grey Vath hid a part of it. Was it because it would be bad if Noah found out? Or was it because of other reasons? Noah didn't know. However, Noah saw an emotion in Grey Vath's eyes that didn't avoid him. Uneasiness. Obviously, at the Elven Sword Dance ceremony in 2 months, something that Grey Vath definitely didn't want to happen would happen. Therefore, Grey Vath wanted Noah to win in the Elven Sword Dance ceremony to eliminate her uneasiness. As an Elven user, your ability can only be considered passable, but your strength is quite amazing. Grey Vath looked straight at Noah. If it's you, you will definitely win. That's why I let you stay. This time, it was Noah's turn to be silent. Frankly speaking, just like during the Holy Grail War, Noah didn't think that winning in the Elven Sword Dance ceremony would fulfill any of his wishes. Noah really didn't have any thoughts about the Elven Sword Dance ceremony. And that meant that Noah didn't have a reason to participate. Similarly, there was also no reason not to participate. I understand. Noah sighed. I will participate in the Elven Sword Dance ceremony in 2 months. Hearing this, Grey Vath smiled. If it was said that Grey Vath was relieved after knowing that Noah used the Elven device, then now, Grey Vath really felt a little relieved. As for whether Noah could win, Grey Vath felt that even if it wasn't 100%, it would still be more than 70% to 80%. The remaining part was because of the Elven Sword Dance ceremony itself. This time, the Elven Sword Dance ceremony is a team competition, Grey Vath said. You still have to find your own teammates. Noah suddenly felt troubled. Teammates? In this academy, could he find teammates? Chapter 962. After walking out of the dean's office, Noah was deeply troubled as he walked outside. As the largest sacrificial ceremony to the 5 Elven Kings, the rules and methods of the Elven Sword Dance Festival depended on the mood of the Elven Kings. It was different every time. For example, the Elven Sword Dance Festival 15 years ago was an unrestricted battle where many people fought at the same time. The Elven Sword Dance Festival 3 years ago was an individual battle. It was a one-on-one elimination match. As long as one defeated the opponent in front of them, they would be able to win until the end. This time, the Elven Sword Dance Festival would be held as a team competition. Every team had to gather 5 Elven users to participate in the competition. Of course, it wasn't just gathering 5 Elven users to participate in the Elven Sword Dance Festival. At the very least, the Elven users who represented the various kingdoms on this continent had to go through a special selection process. The Alessia Elven Academy, as the academy specially used to nurture elven users in the Elven Sword Dance Festival, received 3 spots to participate. In other words, only 3 teams in the Alessia Elven Academy could participate in this Elven Sword Dance Festival. For this reason, the Alessia Elven Academy would rank the students in the academy. In the period before the Elven Sword Dance Festival, the students were allowed to form their own teams and compete for ranking points using various methods decided by the academy. For example, if the students could win the team battle arranged by the academy, they would be able to obtain the corresponding ranking points. Another example was that the students could complete various missions that only Elven users could complete. According to the level of the mission, they would also be able to obtain the corresponding ranking points. Finally, the top 3 teams on the ranking would obtain the right to represent the Alessia Elven Academy and the Alessia Elven Academy to participate in the Elven Sword Dance Festival. They would then head to the Elemental Elf realm and compete with the best Elven users from all over the world. The problem was with the teams. Let's not talk about the fact that I've only been in this academy for less than half a month. Just look at those pure witches here. Who would want to team up with me? Noah sighed loudly. Grave Oz, that witch, really gave me a huge problem. Fortunately, Noah wasn't asked to form a team right away. Due to time, tacit understanding, compatibility, and other issues, the academy didn't have any special requirements. Only teams that had gathered 5 Elven users could participate in the ranking. Even though he was alone, Noah was still able to participate in the group matches arranged by the academy and receive various missions from the academy. As long as he won the team competition and completed the mission of the corresponding level, even if Noah was alone, he would still be able to obtain ranking points and rise to the top of the rankings. However, if they didn't manage to gather enough members before the start of the Elven Sword Dance Festival, they would be disqualified even if they were in the top 3. It's useless to worry about this problem now. Noah patted his cheeks. We can only let nature take its course. With this thought in mind, Noah walked towards the dormitory of the mole class where he currently lived. At this moment, Noah's footsteps suddenly stopped, and his eyes slowly narrowed. Retracting his foot, Noah slowly turned around and looked behind him. Hee, almost at the same time that Noah turned around, an extremely pleasant laughter resounded in the air. Your senses are indeed very sharp. Just a glance at you would attract your attention. Appearing in front of you like this, it seems that it's impossible not to be noticed. The one who said this sentence with an extremely pleasant voice was a young girl. A young girl who sat on a tree branch at the side, looking down at Noah condescendingly. Noah raised his head and met the other's gaze, looking at the tree. She was wearing a dull, dark-colored gown. Beautiful black hair that reached her waist hung down behind her back. There was a bow on one side of her hair. Her skin was the kind that was the fairest, as smooth as a pearl. As for her appearance, it was as if she had walked out of a painting, perfect to the point of being impeccable. Such a young girl was sitting on a tree nearby, constantly sizing up Noah with an undisguised gaze, and making a melodious voice that sounded like the tinkling of a bell. You are more capable than I thought. I spent an entire night searching for a group of magical beasts, but you actually easily dealt with them. Noah slightly narrowed his eyes. As expected, the group of magical beasts attacking Alessia Elven Academy was controlled by someone behind the scenes. And that person, at this very moment, appeared in front of Noah, without the slightest intention of hiding. Noah wasn't interested in the young girl's motive for doing this. Thus, Noah asked the question that he was most concerned about. Who are you? Noah directly looked at the young girl who was as dark as the moonlight, his eyes fluctuating with some waves of surprise. You're not human. When this sentence came out, even the young girl was stunned for a moment, but then she smiled even more happily and said with a smile. That's right, I'm not human. I'm an elf, the highest dark elf. Elf. Noah couldn't help but take another look at the young girl. The highest elf. existing in the form of a human, possessing powerful strength that even high elves couldn't reach. In the world of elemental elves, in terms of rank, other than the 5 elven kings, they were the highest elves. Noah had indeed read about this in a book. However, Noah really didn't expect that he would actually meet a humanoid elf of the highest rank. To elven users, elves weren't just companions who exchanged contracts, they were also a guarantee of strength. Without a contract, elven users wouldn't be so powerful that ordinary humans couldn't reach them. If others were to know that there was an elf of the highest rank here, it would definitely cause a huge commotion, right? And if this dark elf who appeared in the form of a human didn't have a master, then it wouldn't be as simple as causing a commotion, it would definitely cause the envy of all elven users. Under such circumstances, the young girl who called herself the highest dark elf suddenly jumped down from the tree. As if her body was weightless, she lightly landed in front of Noah. The distance was close enough to make one think of an intimate lover. With her hands behind her back, the highest dark elf bent down and looked up at Noah with her beautiful eyes. On her charming face hung a beautiful smile that would make one's heart drunk. In history, other than the Demon King, there hasn't been a second male elf user. Your existence really makes me feel very concerned. The dark elf girl reached out a hand and gently caressed Noah's cheek. Her eyes were also swaying, looking very delicate and pitiful. If it wasn't for me, I believe that those who know would think that you're the Demon King's successor, right? Hearing the dark elf girl's words, Noah only allowed the dark elf girl to caress his cheek. His eyes met the dark elf girl's swaying eyes without any ripples as he asked this question. What do you mean by that? Very simple. The dark elf girl smiled mischievously. I just want to say that if you were the Demon King, then there's no way I wouldn't know. So, I can be sure that you're definitely not the Demon King. As she said this, the smile on the dark elf girl's face grew wider and wider. She even looked at Noah with eyes full of curiosity, as if she wanted to strip him naked and study him thoroughly. But, why would you be the elf user if you're not the Demon King's successor? And why would the fate of the person who was supposed to be the Demon King be changed because of you? How can I not be curious? Each sentence that made Noah feel inconceivable made Noah a little unhappy. What are you talking about? The dark elf girl didn't say anything. She just kept looking at Noah, as if she wanted to remember Noah's appearance forever. Also, as if she was deliberately teasing Noah, she moved away from Noah and turned in a circle in front of Noah. That scene was beautiful to the extreme. You'll find out sooner or later. A pair of pitch-black wings suddenly spread out from the dark elf girl's back. She flew into the air and smiled sweetly. My name is Lustia, don't forget. After saying this, the girl turned into a pitch-black feather and disappeared in midair. Noah quietly looked in the direction the girl disappeared. Lustia. Chapter 963. In the dormitory of the mole class, in a room with a pink atmosphere, Alice was taking off the equipment and swords of the Wind King Knights. After casually placing them on the table, she sat on the sofa and hugged a cute doll, resting her head on it. In the past, after finishing the work of the Wind King Knights and returning to her dormitory, Alice would usually start training in culinary skills. This was because Alice was a very serious person. Although there were some old-fashioned parts due to being too serious, it was also because of this that Alice would honestly accept her immaturity. It could be said that her heart was very upright. This was also the reason why she would train in culinary skills. Alice's dream was to become an outstanding knight. However, while being a knight, Alice also clearly remembered that she was still a young girl. In this aspect, Artoria was different from Artoria, who had given up on being a young girl in order to become an excellent knight and a perfect ruler. Therefore, Alice felt that while she was constantly advancing as a knight, for the sake of her future partner, she had to advance as a young girl as well. Therefore, in her free time, Alice would train her culinary skills for her future husband. Today, Alice did not immediately start training in culinary skills, which was rare. In Alice's mind, she kept replaying the scene that had happened today. The scene of her being rescued by a man from the ferocious magical beast and lying obediently in his arms. Moreover, it was in the form of a Princess Carrie. Thinking of that scene, Alice's pretty face turned completely red, and her heartbeat quickened slightly. The only ones who could communicate with the fairies were the pure and innocent girls. In order to maintain the purity of their bodies and minds, as elven messengers, the witches were almost completely isolated from the male environment since young. They received all kinds of elite education as elven messengers and became super greenhouse flowers who were not used to contact the opposite sex. It was precisely because of this that Noah, a male elven envoy, had suddenly barged into an academy that only had pure and innocent girls. That was why he had caused such a huge commotion, and even caused the pure witches to be subconsciously fearful and curious. However, being pure also meant that they were easy to deceive. Only a little overly ambiguous contact would cause these young girls' hearts to sprout and their hearts to beat incessantly. Now, Alice was undoubtedly in this state. So, he is so strong. While recalling the scene of her being rescued by Noah from the magical beasts, Alice could not help but think of Noah's leisurely and pleasing sword dance among the magical beasts. His sword dance somehow feels a little different from ours. The so-called sword dance originally referred to those battle techniques that were used to please the elves and were extremely pleasing to the eye. In order to unleash the full power of the elves, the elven messengers' battle techniques had to be closer to the sword dance. Otherwise, it was very likely that the contracted elves would not be able to unleash 100% of their power, or even be unable to control the contracted elves. For this reason, every elven user had to work hard on their battle techniques, so that their battle techniques would possess true battle prowess. At the same time, they also needed to have a ritual effect that could unleash the full power of the elven user. Alice, 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 and Alice, 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 and Alice, 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 and Alice, Alice. Take Alice for example. If she had to divide her sword dance into a ratio, then the ratio of practicality to aesthetics was 50/50. This was also the ratio of ordinary elven messengers' sword dances. However, Noah's sword dance gave Alice the feeling that it was 100% practical, and even the aesthetics were 100% perfect. Alice had only seen such a perfect sword dance from one person before. Lena Subble. 3 years ago, she had become the champion of the Elven Sword Dance Festival, using her beautiful sword dance to conquer the hearts of almost all elven messengers and obtain the title of the strongest sword dancer. At that time, Alice was still young, but she had watched the Elven Sword Dance Festival, and had also watched the sword dance of the strongest sword dancer. Thus, Alice had also been captivated by the sword dance of the strongest sword dancer. Noah's sword dance was completely different from Lena Subble's. If one were to say that Lena Subble's sword dance was beautiful, then Noah's sword dance was elegant and free. However, the sword dance of these two people had a kind of perfection. It was 100% practical and aesthetically pleasing, and there was no feeling of one aspect falling behind the other. That was the true sword dance. Alice thought so in her heart. At this moment, a voice sounded by Alice's ear. "What are you doing?" The sudden voice caused Alice, who was immersed in the memories of the morning, to shiver. Her hand almost subconsciously grasped the hilt of the knight's sword beside the sofa, and she fiercely pulled it out, bringing with it a sharp gust of wind as she swung it towards the source of the voice. Clink! At the same time, a hand suddenly appeared by the side of the knight's sword. With a crisp sound, the thumb and index finger pinched the sharp blade of the knight's sword, stopping the sword in its tracks. Only then did Alice react, and see the full appearance of the owner of the voice clearly. Impressively, it was the person that Alice had been blushing and her heart was beating fast. Hee hee. Tightly pinching the sharp blade of the knight's sword, Noah looked at Alice and smiled insincerely. "Your way of greeting is still so special, Captain Knight." Being looked at by Noah with such a fake smile, Alice's pretty face turned red with a bang, and she stuttered. "You? Why are you here? Why am I here?" Noah said helplessly. "I say, Captain Knight, you can't have forgotten that I was invited here by you, and that I'm temporarily staying with you, right?" Noah was right. Alice had indeed forgotten. Stay. Stay with me." Alice's face looked like it was boiling, and even steam was starting to come out. "Stay with me. Stay with me." At this moment, Alice was in a complete mess. Thinking about how Noah had saved her from the hands of the magical beast in the morning, and how he had hugged her tightly, and then thinking about the fact that she was staying with Noah, Alice's heart felt like it was about to explode, beating violently. In such a situation, Alice could only yell at Noah with a flushed face. We're not staying with you. I'm sleeping in my own room. You're only sleeping on the sofa here." I didn't say we were sleeping together." The corner of Noah's mouth twitched, and he said strangely. "Why are you having such a big reaction?" It's none of your business." Alice hurriedly put away the knight's sword that Noah was holding tightly, and hurriedly picked up the equipment on the sofa. I'm going back to my room." After saying this, Alice rushed into her room as if she was escaping, and with a loud bang, she shut the door tightly. Seeing this scene, Noah was speechless for a long time. What's going on? On the other side, Alice, who had shut the door tightly, leaned against the door, and clutched her chest, feeling her intense heartbeat. Her face was filled with embarrassment and confusion. Why do I feel this way? Undoubtedly, I didn't feel this way yesterday. There must be a mistake somewhere. Alice could only plunge into her bed, hugging her pillow, and squeezing out a moaning sound. The night passed by as Noah was at a loss and Alice's blushing heart was beating fast. The next day, Noah's first feeling when he woke up in a daze was confusion. This time, I didn't have the dream of the saintess fighting the demon king. With this doubt, Noah's mind gradually regained clarity. However, as Noah's mind gradually cleared up, he found something strange. For some reason, in Noah's arms, there seemed to be something round, soft, and smooth, very warm and comfortable. If he had to make a comparison, it was like the most advanced pillow. Noah had hugged similar things before. For example, Mila. For example, Lisanna. For example, Julie and Lilith. And for example, Kitten and Hastia, who often burrowed into Noah's bed. What's going on? Chapter 964. The extremely comfortable touch from his arms made Noah's somewhat fuzzy consciousness disappear in an instant, and he was completely awake. Without any hesitation, Noah suddenly tightened the quilt covering his body and pulled it open. With the sound of the quilt being pulled open, the scene that originally existed under the quilt was displayed in front of Noah. However, looking at the scene under the quilt, Noah's face was completely stiff. With a soft sound, something like the highest grade of pillow slowly straightened up from Noah's arms, and a silver-white color filled Noah's entire eyes in an instant. It was the color of waist-length hair that looked extremely elegant, like a waterfall hanging down to her waist. As if swaying, the extremely beautiful silver-white long hair gently floated in front of Noah's eyes, and then drooped down with gravity. It swayed in a circle of beautiful arcs and draped over a layer of skin. A layer of skin that was as white as pearls and as smooth as jade. Finally, it gave people a feeling that it was as smooth and beautiful as ivory. And with such waist-length silver-white hair and ivory-like smooth and beautiful skin, the petite girl sat up from Noah's arms and entered Noah's eyes instead of the silver-white hair and ivory-like skin. At this moment, Noah only felt that time had stopped, and even his breathing had stopped for a moment. It wasn't just because of the sudden appearance of such a petite and cute girl in his arms. It was also because the girl's slightly raised little face was so delicate that even Noah, who had seen many beautiful girls, couldn't help but feel suffocated. This was not the most important thing. The most important thing was that this beautiful and petite girl who sat up from Noah's arms was naked. No. She wasn't completely naked. On the girl's pair of equally beautiful ivory-like thighs, she was actually wearing a pair of black over-the-knee socks. But in the case of almost naked, this pair of over-the-knee socks did not play any role in covering it all. Instead, it added an indescribable charm. Undoubtedly, it was such a petite girl wearing over-the-knee socks sitting in his arms, but Noah did not have any blasphemous thoughts. At this time, there was only a sense of beauty and inviolable holiness in Noah's heart as if a fairy appeared in front of him. As a result, Noah could only look at the beautiful girl sitting in his arms with a stiff face, unable to speak for a long time. It was not as if Noah had not encountered the same situation before. After all, in the world of absolute dual blades, Julie and Lilith slept in Noah's arms more than once, making Noah usher in a wonderful morning. Therefore, Noah thought that he had long been used to the same scene. Until now, Noah knew that the so-called habit was just because the really impactful things had not appeared in front of him yet. Even if he was used to beautiful things, when he saw new beautiful things, humans would involuntarily be moved from the bottom of their hearts. However, in addition to being moved, Noah was also shocked by the impact of the sudden things in front of him. In such a situation, Noah didn't know how to react at all. For a while, he could only stiffen his face and fall into a state where he couldn't react. Unfortunately, time didn't really stand still. When Noah fell into a state where he couldn't react, the petite girl who sat up from Noah's arms, only wearing over-the-knee socks on her thighs, tilted her head, swaying with an inexplicable expression. A pair of pitiful eyes stared at Noah and spat out such a sentence without ripples. "Have you woken up?" The girl's voice wasn't the kind of clear and crisp water droplets that matched her appearance, but carried a somewhat steady bass. This voice couldn't be said to be not cute, but it didn't contain any emotions or fluctuations in it, making people feel cold. It was this cold and indifferent voice that caused Noah to shudder and come to his senses. "You." Noah's first reaction was to sit up. However, because the beautiful girl with silvery white waist-length hair was sitting on Noah's waist, when Noah sat up, the distance between his face and the extremely beautiful and tender face was infinitely close. Looking at the delicate face that suddenly enlarged in front of him, Noah's heart was shocked. He quickly raised his head and opened up a distance, his heart beating slightly faster. Noah had to admit, he hadn't been so embarrassed for a long time. What made Noah even more embarrassed was that seeing Noah raise his head and open up a distance, the beautiful and delicate girl, like a doll, actually moved her head closer and slightly raised her eyes, letting a pair of flickering eyes meet with Noah's eyes. "What's wrong with you? Are you not feeling well?" "No. No." Noah's voice became a little strange. "I'm not feeling unwell, I'm very comfortable." As soon as this sentence came out, Noah fiercely slapped himself, making a very clear and loud sound. This slap made Noah calm down a little, but also made the beautiful girl show a puzzled expression and asked innocently, "Why did you hit yourself?" "Master. I just wanted to calm myself down a little." Noah smiled embarrassedly, then immediately reacted and said in surprise, "Master." "Yes." The beautiful girl with silvery white hair nodded and said as if it was a matter of course, "You are my master. I'm your master." Noah hadn't completely understood the meaning of this sentence, and then, on the back of his left hand, a sharp tingling sensation was transmitted to his nerves. That sharp tingling sensation came from Noah's elf mark. Feeling this sharp tingling sensation, Noah finally understood. You. Noah looked at the girl in a daze. You're not my contracted elf, are you? Yes. The beautiful girl with silvery white hair answered expressionlessly. I am your contracted elf, and also your sword. You are my contractor, and also my master. Saying such a sentence, the holy sword elf who had killed the demon king in the past moved in the direction of Noah, and covered Noah's left hand with the elf mark with an ice-cold little hand. Looking straight at Noah, some indescribable emotions emerged in her eyes. I hereby swear that your life will be protected by me, and the enemies that obstruct you will be eliminated by me. The holy sword elf who had been sealed for hundreds of years tightly held Noah's hand and said softly, So, please don't die before me. From this sentence, Noah actually heard a kind of pleading. And from the pitiful eyes of this elf in front of him, Noah also saw a kind of pleading emotion. Noah didn't know why he had such emotions. But, for some reason, in Noah's heart, there was also a kind of sadness that emerged. At this moment, the figure of a girl appeared in Noah's mind. She held a steel sword that shone with silver light in her hand, and had long hair that was as beautiful as golden sand. She was called the Saintess of Salvation by later generations, the girl who saved the entire continent. However, the young lady's figure gradually dimmed. As if she was planning to disappear from this world, bit by bit, she dimmed down. Following the disappearance of the Saintess of Salvation, the sadness in Noah's heart became more and more intense. This kind of emotion caused Noah to hold the delicate hand of the holy sword elf. Paw dash. Just as Noah was about to reply, the sound of something heavily hitting the ground rang out. He saw Alice, who was standing at the door of her room, staring blankly at Noah and the holy sword elf who were tightly pressed together on the sofa. Her eyes were filled with an expression of disbelief. At Alice's feet, the knight's sword that she didn't have time to wear at her waist fell to the ground with its scabbard, causing the sound from just now. Seeing this scene, the corner of Noah's mouth twitched. He could already foresee what was going to happen next. I misjudged you. As expected, Alice picked up the knight's sword from the ground with tears in her eyes and fiercely pulled it out. You shameless person. Suddenly, in Alice's room, there was a burst of noise that didn't calm down for a long time. Chapter 965. Sigh. Walking in the vast atrium of the Elven Academy, Noah was still sighing about a rather bad and noisy morning. However, that was also something that couldn't be helped. Originally, Noah was already the target of all the pure and innocent young girls in this academy. In the end, such a person was closely attached to a naked beautiful girl. It would be really strange if it didn't cause a commotion. Of course, the commotion was caused, but it was left unsettled in the end. Although Alice seemed to be very excited, it was also because of this that Noah, who felt that the girl wouldn't listen to anything, could only imitate the method he used to meet Alice for the first time. He tied Alice up and threw her in the dormitory before coming out of the dormitory. Probably now, the knights in the Wind King Knights should have gone to the Mole class dormitory to find Alice and liberate her because the leader had not arrived for a long time. However, Noah still remembered the expression on Alice's face when he had tied her up and thrown her into the dormitory. When he had walked out of the dormitory, Alice had looked at him in the last moment. That expression was simply like looking at her husband who had cheated on her. It was full of resentment. Sigh. Thinking of this, Noah couldn't help but sigh. Looking at Noah like this, the elven girl who had been following Noah obediently like a small animal spoke. Master, did I make you angry? In broad daylight, this elven girl who suddenly appeared naturally couldn't appear naked like in the dormitory. Although there was no other man in Alicia Elven Academy other than Noah, it still took a lot of courage to run naked under the sun under the eyes of others. The elven girl didn't feel ashamed in this regard. But Noah didn't dare to imagine what kind of eyes others would look at him with when they saw a naked, beautiful and delicate girl following beside him. Therefore, when Noah wanted to take out a set of clothes from his treasury for the elven girl to use, the elven girl transformed her own clothes. It was the same uniform as the students in the Elven Academy. The pure white uniform matched the elven girl's originally fair skin and silver-white waist-length hair. For some reason, it had a particularly perfect feeling. As a result, many students in the surroundings frequently looked over here, pointed at the elven girl, and screamed uncontrollably. That appearance was as if they had seen an extremely cute doll, and only 2 hearts jumped out of their eyes. Unfortunately, with such a cute and beautiful girl by his side, it also made the surrounding students look at Noah with a hint of fear in their eyes. Come to think of it, these students must have thought that the elven girl was the prey that Noah had abducted, right? Noah could only suppress the sigh that surged in his throat for the 3rd time. He shook his head, dispelled other thoughts, and looked at the elven girl. You said that not only can your body reflect all magic, but you are also immune to all kinds of negative energy, including tempering, petrification, weakness, poison, and even curses. They are all useless against you. Could it be that it's not true? At this moment, Noah could clearly feel it. In Aster's eyes, there was a strong sense of uneasiness. That sense of uneasiness was as if he was worried that Noah was lying to him. Of course, Noah was not lying to Aster. I do have a body that is different from ordinary people. Noah smiled. No matter if it is magic or other negative energy, it is useless against me. Is that so? The uneasiness in Aster's eyes gradually disappeared and turned into relief. That's good. What's wrong? Noah asked curiously. Is there a problem with my body? No, there is no problem. Rather, I am very happy that you have such a body. Aster shook his head and looked at Noah again. With such a body, you are destined to be the master of me, the world's strongest sword spirit. The strongest sword sprite. Noah blinked his eyes. In other words, you are the strongest among the steel attribute sword spirits, right? Yes, master, Aster said softly. I am the strongest sword spirit. Just like you, I have the highest level of curse resistance that can nullify all magic and negative energy. As long as you are willing, I can even break the contract between other elves, cut apart any elven magic and remove any curse. This is my ability. You have such an ability. Noah was stunned at first, then laughed bitterly. Then we are indeed a good match. So, you are destined to be my master. Aster clenched a small hand and placed it in front of him while looking at Noah. Perhaps, I am also destined to be your master. Noah was a little embarrassed by Aster's straightforward confession. At the same time, Noah's heart was filled with doubts. Even if his body was very similar to Aster's ability, it should not be to the extent of destined to be your master, right? In addition to Aster's previous performance, Noah felt that there must be other reasons for Aster to say such words. There must be other more important and heavier reasons. Without the power of the Holy Grail, a pure magic crystal-like command curse wouldn't be branded on Noah's body and let Noah successfully form a contract with a servant. This time, he wasn't so lucky as there was a Holy Grail to interfere. As a result, the contract between Noah and the elf would naturally be bounced off by Noah's body that was resistant to foul curses and wouldn't take effect. Fortunately, I have the same resistance to this curse as Master, so I was able to form a contract with Master. Aster explained. But, in order to successfully brand the spirit mark on Master, my power was almost completely exhausted, so I didn't even have the power to maintain my form and fell into a state of deep sleep, so I couldn't respond to Master's summon. This caused Master to be unable to use me. This time, Noah finally understood what was going on. Then it's really like what you said, it's all because of me. Noah sighed and looked at Aster. Then, have you recovered your power? Yes. Yesterday, it was still a bit difficult. However, when Master summoned me and turned me into the fairy device, he poured a large amount of divine might into me. I have already absorbed enough divine might to recover all of my strength. Aster nodded. Under normal circumstances, when my power was exhausted to that extent, it would take me 1 or 2 years to recover to the point where I could maintain my form. Who knows how long it would take to recover all my power, but Master's divine aura was too abundant. I only absorbed a part of it and almost all my power was recovered. Today, I have already recovered to my peak. Oh. Noah's heart skipped a beat. In other words, when I used you yesterday, it wasn't all of your power. Aster nodded silently, making Noah smile. Very good, Aster. Noah held Aster's hand. Then let me feel how much power you have. I am Master's sword. Aster held Noah's hand. Although his tone was light, there was a sense of determination. Everything is as you wish. Noah held Aster's hand in a thicket in Alicia Elven Academy. They entered the thicket and arrived at a lawn covered with grass. Then, they surveyed their surroundings. This was the place where the students of the Elven Academy who liked peace and quiet would rest after class. Because it was still morning, most of the students had already gone to class. Naturally, there was no one here. Then, here it is. Noah turned his head and looked at Aster. I'm counting on you, Aster. Yes. Aster held Noah's hand tightly and closed his eyes. At the same time, Noah also closed his eyes. The source of divine aura in his body immediately surged with energy and poured into Aster's body through his arm. Chapter 967. With Aster's cooperation, he channeled his own holy aura into the Demon Slayer. Feeling the power of the Demon Slayer, Noah slowly understood the wonders of the elf device. Unlike normal weapons or even noble artifacts, the elf device was formed by the elf user's contracted elf. Not only did it have life, but it could also cooperate with the elf user. It could also combine the holy aura of both the elf user and the contracted elf to unleash a stronger power than either of them alone. Other elf devices aside, Noah's Demon Slayer was the elf device formed by the strongest sword elf. In terms of quality and power, in Noah's opinion, it was comparable to the highest level noble artifact in the Gate of Babylon. It might even be better than that. At the very least, the Demon Slayer was definitely not weaker than the Excalibur. The power of both of them was probably on the same level. However, the elf device and noble artifacts were weapons of different natures. Although the Demon Slayer was not weaker than the Excalibur, that was only in terms of overall grade. If the Excalibur released its true name and unleashed the true killing power of the City Slayer relic, its power would definitely be stronger than the Demon Slayer relic. However, in its normal state, when it was not releasing its real name, Noah's Excalibur would not be able to compare to the Demon Slayer. For example, Gilgamesh's parting sword was known as one of the strongest noble artifacts, but that was only when it released its real name and unleashed the power that could cut the world apart. If it were to directly use the parting sword to slash someone, that strange noble artifact might not even be as good as an E-grade noble artifact. It was the same logic. Although Excalibur's attack could be said to be extremely destructive when Noah's true name was released, it was just an extremely sharp sword that could cut through iron as if it was mud when Noah's true name was not released. It would not increase Noah's strength at all. The demon slayer, on the other hand, was able to merge with Noah's mind. They were compatible with each other, combining the divine power of both the elf user and the contracted elf to unleash a powerful force. After all, although Noah had endless holy aura, its damage output was limited. Although Aster's holy aura was not as terrifying as Noah's, in terms of damage output, it was almost the same as Noah's. This could be seen from the tug-of-war between Noah and Aster's holy aura when they first formed a contract. Under such circumstances, the power of Noah and Aster's holy aura combined together would naturally be stronger than an extremely sharp sword that could cut through iron like it was mud. This might sound a little confusing, but it was actually easy to understand. Let's make an assumption. If Noah's usual strength was assumed to be 100, then with the Excalibur, Noah's strength would increase to 120. However, when Noah released the real name of the Excalibur, Noah's strength would reach 1,000. One could only imagine his strength. Similarly, if Noah's usual strength was assumed to be 100, then with the Demon Slayer, Noah's strength would reach 500. When the real name of the Excalibur was released, the Demon Slayer would not be able to compare to the Excalibur. However, when the real name of the Excalibur was not released, the Demon Slayer would definitely be stronger than the Excalibur. Noah remembered that in his Gate of Babylon, there seemed to be a noble phantasm similar to the Demon Slayer. Indestructible Lake, Aroundite. That was the noble phantasm of Lancelot, the most famous knight in the Knights of the Round Table under the Night King Artoria. It was a pair with the Excalibur. Both of them were entrusted to the humans by the lake spirits. They had the same origin as the Excalibur, and their tenacity was comparable to that of the Excalibur. It was a noble phantasm that would never be destroyed. When using this noble phantasm, whether it was strength, durability, agility, magic, or luck, all of the wielder's ability points would increase by 1 level. Moreover, because this noble phantasm had a legend of killing a dragon, it could also deal additional damage to opponents with dragon attributes. In terms of level, the Indestructible Lake was also a grade A++ noble phantasm. However, this noble phantasm did not require the real name to be released. As long as it was used, it would increase the wielder's strength. The Demon Slayer and the Indestructible Lake could be considered to be similar types of weapons. However, because the Demon Slayer had a life of its own, Aster had taken the initiative to cooperate with Noah, and with the addition of the Holy Aura, the Demon Slayer was stronger than the Aroundite in terms of amplification. Moreover, the sharpness, precision, and toughness of the Demon Slayer were all determined by the amount of divine energy that Noah, the elf, imbued into it. With Noah's divine might and energy, with the Demon Slayer in hand, Noah would even dare to fight Tony, who had the authority of Silver Hand Laceration and Steel Barrier. Of course, whether or not he could win after going all out was another matter altogether. Of course, that was under the condition that he could perfectly utilize Aster's strength. Now, Noah's control and cooperation with Aster had yet to reach a perfect level. As a result, under Aster's guidance, Noah spent the entire day familiarizing himself with the Demon Slayer. That's all for today. When the sky started to turn yellow, Noah stretched and said to Aster, who was beside him, "I'm sorry, Aster, for letting you accompany me for so long. I am Master's sword." Aster said expressionlessly, "Other than Master, I have no reason to spend my time elsewhere." "You can't say that." Noah squatted down and looked at Aster's beautiful eyes. That was not an ordinary orphanage. It was not even marked on the map. It was a training facility for assassins that could not be exposed to the light of day. Teaching Institute. It was a secret organization that found witches with the potential to become elven envoys from all over the continent and gave them special training to cultivate outstanding assassins. When Lotus was abandoned, such an organization had noticed the power within her body and brought her back. As Lotus grew up, she gradually grasped this power. Then, in the teaching yard, she encountered the legendary fairy that was sealed away. The highest-ranking dark elf Lustia. She was once owned by the Demon King Solomon and had the fate of guiding the Demon King's successor. Lustia still remembered the first time she met Lotus. She saw Lotus use her power as if it was her own arm. Other than shock, there was only disbelief. No one knew better than Lustia, the Demon King's guide, what kind of power it was. That was a power that should have been inherited by a male elf envoy like Demon King Solomon. However, as a genuine young girl, Lotus somehow inherited this power for some unknown reason. More importantly, the power in Lotus' body should not have been awakened so easily. However, Lotus had naturally awakened this power the moment she was born. She did not even need Lustia's guidance to control this power. On the contrary, it was Lotus. This young girl seemed to be well aware of why she had such power, why she could naturally awaken this power, and why she could freely control it. She remained silent the entire time. Lustia, who was extremely curious about this, chose to stay by Lotus' side. Then, 4 years ago, a mysterious incident caused the teaching institute to be razed to the ground in a single night. At that time, the young girl took the opportunity to escape with Lustia. After a series of twists and turns, the young girl participated in the Elven Sword Dance Festival 3 years ago and received a name that truly belonged to her. Do you want to see him? Lustia suddenly smiled. Lotus Asubble. The young girl, who was known as the strongest sword dancer, slowly nodded her head. A terrifying light flashed in her eyes. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.